Bona tarda a tots. Benvinguts a aquest fantàstic recinte modernista, ja veuen, de Sant Pau, concretament en aquesta sala, la sala Francesc Cambó, fantàstica també. Benvinguts a la conferència internacional Regions per la Biodiversitat, assolint els objectius d'Aichi. Welcome everyone to Sant Pau, the largest Art Nouveau site in Europe. Ens estem quedant sense llum, per això ara no m'hi acabava de veure. Welcome to the International Conference Regions for Biodiversity, Achieving the Aichi Targets. Abans de començar, volem tenir un moment de record per Salvador Grau, el que va ser, com sabeu, el cap de planificació de l'entorn natural i que ens va deixar fa uns dies.
El Govern de la Generalitat de Catalunya i expressament el Departament de Territori i Sostenibilitat vol recordar avui de manera molt especial en Salvador Grau, que ens va deixar dijous passat, 23 de juny, després d'una llarga malaltia que va afrontar amb una enteresa admirable. Amb més de 25 anys de bagatge en l'àmbit de la conservació del patrimoni natural, pràcticament tots exercits com a funcionari de l'Administració Ambiental Catalana, Salvador Grau va contribuir enormement al disseny del sistema d'espais naturals protegits de Catalunya i a definir una política i una estratègia de conservació del patrimoni natural del país. Treballador apassionat, tenaç, infatigable, va creure sempre en la necessitat de col·laborar amb centres de recerca, amb entitats i organitzacions del tercer sector ambiental i, a més, va creure fermament en la necessitat de participar en xarxes internacionals i organitzacions com Energy Forestry, que poguessin donar més projecció i qualitat a la feina exercida pel Govern de la Generalitat de Catalunya. Per ell, la conservació de la natura havia de ser un dels pilars fonamentals del país i nosaltres, recollint el seu testimoni, treballarem perquè sigui així. En record seu.
Ningú no dubta que la natura és imprescindible per al benestar de l'ésser humà. Ens aporta, per exemple, elements bàsics sense els quals no podríem sobreviure. Aquesta conferència, que ara mateix és a punt de començar, permetrà consensuar una posició comú de la xarxa de governs regionals per al desenvolupament sostenible i altres governs regionals, que serà traslladada als estats signataris del conveni de Cancún, que, com sabeu, es farà el pròxim mes de desembre, del 3 al 17, el que es coneix com el COP13. Catalunya i la resta de governs regionals tenim un fort compromís amb la biodiversitat. És per això que esperem aprendre de totes aquestes experiències i també les dificultats d'altres governs d'altres països i de regions. La conferència confirmarà el lideratge dels governs regionals en la implementació de les mesures ambicioses per poder protegir el medi ambient i també la biodiversitat. Dono ja la paraula concretament a Gemini Ttilakasiri, el president de la xarxa de governs regionals del desenvolupament sostenible i ministre també d'Agricultura, Territori, Irrigació, Pesca, Producció Animal, Salut i Desenvolupament Agrari del govern de Western Province a Sri Lanka. Please, come to the stage.
Yes, you want to light?
Dark, right?
Yes, good. Thank you. Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, all of you, good evening. The network of regional governments for sustainable development, NRG PSD, is pleased to support this conference that the government of Catalonia hosts in this wonderful and biodiversity inspiring venue. The government of Catalonia, as well as the rest of NRG PSD members, is very committed in biodiversity preservation and the achievement of the Aichi targets in all subnational territories of the world, especially since the approval of the Sustainable Development Goals. We consider it more necessary than ever to approach to biodiversity management with a cross-cutting perspective involving all our governments, legislators and ministers, as well as different sectors and actors. For this reason, today and tomorrow, subnational government from 4 continents will share in Barcelona their experiences and expertise achieving the Aichi targets and will establish fruitful dialogue with stakeholders, other governments, levels, and preservation organization. We were sure that the fruitful conclusion we will reach by tomorrow. Thanks to all participants' engagement and proactive role will be crucial contribution to the CDB COP 13th in Cancun. We are certain that our experience and achievements will serve not only as important bottom-up information, but also as inspiration to the CDB and its parties. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Demanem la presència, sisplau, aquí dalt a l'escenari. Demanem també que ens donin una mica de llum, perquè si no, no ens hi veurem i ningú serà capaç de llegir el que té preparat avui aquí en aquesta jornada. Demanem la presència del Raul Romeva, el conseller d'Afers Exteriors, Relacions Institucionals i Transparència de la Generalitat de Catalunya, i també de Valente Junyent, sisplau, pugeu a l'escenari, perquè la paraula ara la tindrà en primera opció Valente Junyent, alcalde de Manresa, recordem-ho, i diputat d'Espais Naturals i Medi Ambient de la Diputació de Barcelona.
Conseller, honorable conseller, ministre, secretària general del Departament de Medi Ambient i Sostenibilitat, senyores i senyors, molt bona tarda. És un plaer poder compartir amb tots vostès aquesta inauguració de la Conferència Internacional Regions for Biodiversity. Què hi fa la Diputació i, en aquest cas, el diputat de Medi Ambient de la Diputació en aquesta inauguració, ben bé per poder acreditar dues coses. D'una banda, la feina que fem des d'aquest nivell de l'administració local, supramunicipal, segon nivell, en aquest cas, la Diputació és 311 municipis de la província de Barcelona i som una administració de segon nivell que gestionem una sèrie de qüestions que ara us explicaré breument i que alhora estem en col·laboració constant amb els ajuntaments d'una banda i amb el govern regional, com és el cas de moment, com és el cas del govern regional de la Generalitat. Nosaltres, més enllà de les competències específiques, des de fa 40 anys la Diputació té diversos parcs naturals, fins a 12 a la província de Barcelona. El primer va ser el 1972, el Parc de Sant Llorenç del Munt i l'Obac, i en posterioritat vam arribar al Montseny, al Garraf, al Montnegre Corredor, fins a 12 àrees protegides i més de 100.000 hectàrees que gestiona de forma conjunta la Diputació, gestionem amb els municipis. Disposem d'un pla estratègic per la conservació de la biodiversitat i alhora, des del Departament de Medi Ambient, fem les tasques educacionals, ambientals i pedagògiques en relació als nostres municipis i també en relació als escolars d'aquesta demarcació de la Diputació de la província de Barcelona, de la demarcació de Barcelona. Un dels darrers exemples de quina ha estat la implicació de la Diputació és l'estratègia 2020 de la Unió Europea per la biodiversitat i el treball conjunt amb la Generalitat i amb els municipis per potenciar i coordinar les polítiques territorials amb la conservació i com a model d'aquesta part d'Europa. En diverses ocasions hem estat escollits per la Comissió Europea com a referent per la tasca que s'està fent des de la Diputació i per aquesta vocació internacional que hem acreditat en diverses fases de la història recent d'aquesta institució. El 1978 la Diputació va ser fundadora de la secció espanyola de la Federació Europea de Parcs Naturals, Parcs Nacionals i Parcs Naturals, o de la Federació FEDENATUR de Parcs Periurbans. Els diversos agermanaments que s'han fet en parcs urbans europeus i llatinoamericans, els projectes en els quals participem habitualment, són una mostra de la convicció que des de la Diputació tenim per treballar localment i desenvolupar polítiques regionals coordinadament amb els ajuntaments i amb el govern regional, el govern de la Generalitat. Jo diria que hi ha un aspecte, que seria el segon que hauríem de fer incidència i èmfasi, és aquesta coherència, coordinació i cooperació, repeteixo, coherència, coordinació i cooperació entre els diferents nivells del govern del nostre país i els governs locals i nosaltres, que som aquesta administració de segon grau, aquesta administració intermitja. També ho fem a nivell internacional, com us deia abans, i és ben segur que és de l'única manera que amb aquesta coordinació en diversos àmbits podem mantenir un alt nivell de sensibilitat i d'implicació en el nostre territori arreu d'aquests més de 300 municipis que representem. A mi, a part de donar-los la benvinguda a la ciutat de Barcelona i demanar-los que disfrutin de les xerrades i de la ciutat, només em cal desitjar-los que la conferència sigui un pas endavant en aquest sentit de coordinació i segur que serà molt profitosa per a tots. Moltes gràcies.
I ara té la paraula el conseller Raul Romeva. No sé si et farà falta el llum.
No ho crec.
És una mica fosc, però...
No passa res. Thank you very much. Distinguished members of the government, representative members of the international organizations, experts, friends, ladies and gentlemen, amigues, amics, sigueu benvinguts, sigueu benvingudes totes i tots a Barcelona, a Catalunya, i per tant també aquest magnífic, in this splendorous modern style building of the Sant Pau Hospital. My words are absolutely, let's say, felt. Welcome here on behalf of the government of Catalonia, and especially in that specific moment, that specific situation, I would like to thank and welcome the Conference Regions for Biodiversity achieving the Aichi targets. We sincerely appreciate your presence here. We especially appreciate your job, your work, your reflections. We, as it has been said, we expect this is going to be a very successful conference. We are sure it's going to be. And it's important because this is also the end of a 6 years co-presidency of Catalonia, of that region, of that network, the Regional Governments for Sustainable Development Network. And that's for us absolutely important. You know that one of the motivations of this country to be something singular, especially in the world, is to participate with its singular, with its own voice, to these kinds of interchanges that we understand are absolutely crucial. The challenge that we are approaching, that is in front of us during those 2 days, is absolutely crucial. is more than a reflection. It makes a privileged approach to what we understand is a space of dialogue, and we understand is the regional approach of how we have to tackle many of the issues that are concerning to the strategic plan of the United Nations for Biodiversity 2011-2020 in the Aichi targets. The importance of your work thus lays in the fact that your position will be presented, and that's for us crucial, will be presented to the state signatories to the Convention of Biological Diversity of the United Nations during the 13th conference of the parties to be held in Cancun next December. So, in short, the work you do in these 2 next days, conference in Barcelona, will contribute directly to the formal shaping of the regional local commitment with the achievements of the Aichi targets at the global level, and that, as has been said as well, at the level of the 2020. Let me add that it is not only the commitment with the Aichi targets, but also the implementation of the global 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement on the Climate Change, which matters here. This conference will contribute visualizing the strategic role of the sub-state governments in the conservation of biodiversity. The government of Catalonia knows it very well. Our country's natural heritage is rich, and we are proud to live in a land with a high biodiversity level. We are also aware that this heritage is an essential component of our identity. That's not a minor issue. And that is also strategic in terms of health, economy, and employment through what is known as green economy. This is why biodiversity must be granted a central position in governmental policies, regulation, plannings, and projects whatsoever. However, natural heritage, this truly green infrastructure of our country, is subjected to a very strong pressure. More than 7 million people are concentrated in 30% of the territory, mainly on the coast. Additionally, to our intense agricultural, livestock, and industrial economy, Catalonia is visited by more than 20 million tourists every year. Urban sprawl and the high density of the road infrastructure network in some areas of our country also increase existing pressure on biodiversity. The pressure of this model is observed in an ecological footprint that far exceeds Catalonia's surface. Therefore, in the process of constructing a new state, that's what we are doing right now, the government of Catalonia wants to put sustainability at the heart, at the center of all political actions. The conservation of biodiversity and natural heritage has become one of the backbones of our country. That is why we are committed to adopt and implement, as a matter of urgency, the 2 basic legal tools that will allow us to effectively protect our natural heritage. One is the Law on Biodiversity and Natural Heritage. The other one is the Catalan Strategy for Biodiversity Conservation. Both documents must contribute to an effective implementation of the Convention of Biological Diversity and the achievements of the Aichi targets, and the obligations and commitments established by the European directives and national laws. However, let me tell you that Catalonia has made progress in the fulfillment of many Aichi targets already, especially in relation to the social awareness on the value of biodiversity, which recent Catalan surveys show is a growing awareness of the importance of preserving nature, and more than 66% of our citizens think it is a key issue. A second achievement is the integration of biodiversity on the land use planning through the use of environmental criteria in spatial planning, as shown in the Urban Master Plan for the Catalan Coastal System, that's made in 2005, and in the Barcelona Metropolitan Plan. Thirdly, the design of a robust network of protected areas, which covers the 32% of Catalonia. Some experts in the room are also very well knowing that situation. The restoration of habitats that has improved ecological connectivity and recovered degraded natural environments such as wetlands and coastal landscape. In fifth terms, the increase of our knowledge on biodiversity by means of our biodiversity monitoring and conservation program, 2009, and the biodiversity database of Catalonia, with data from 25,000 species. Furthermore, I should mention our excellent research centers, that is CREAF, the Forest Technology Center of Catalonia, or the Institute for Marine Sciences, among others. All of them generate highly valuable scientific knowledge that should contribute to a better biodiversity management. Moreover, it is important to point out the existence of a very active and organized civil society contributing to the environmental debate. As an example, one of the most recent initiatives coming from civil society is conservation.cat, conservation.cat, which brings together a large group of professionals and scientists who have made very important contributions in this field. Another major contributor to the architecture from the technical point of view of the current policy of biodiversity conservation in Catalonia was Mr. Salvador Grau, who passed away last week, and who we honored just in the initial moments of that session. I feel it's important to remember him because, well, not only to remember, to express also our condolences to our Ministry for Territory and Sustainable team, who worked very closely with him, and obviously to his beloved colleagues and family. Please accept my heartfelt words as a tribute to his work and memory. Finally, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank once again the Network of Governments for Sustainable Development, the NRG for SD, for the support to the government of Catalonia in organizing this conference. I'd like to conclude by wishing you a fruitful 2 days dialogue in Barcelona, always something that is appreciated for many newcomers. I hope your contributions will serve as a solid starting point to reach the conference of the parties in December, where we need to make sure that the voice of the local and regional governments is listened to. Thank you very much, and may our distinguished speakers take the floor. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Romeva, for your words. And now we're going to see a message from someone who couldn't come. Ara veurem un missatge gravat d'una persona que ha pogut ser aquí, que es tracta de Braulio de Sousa Díaz, és el secretari executiu del Conveni per la Diversitat Biològica. Ens ha enviat un missatge.
Dear Minister Raul, Excellencies, dear colleagues from the Network of Regional Governments for Sustainability, ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful to the Government of Catalonia and to the Network of Regional Governments for Sustainability for the kind invitation to the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity to contribute to this prestigious conference, and regret that it has not been possible to be with you due to prior commitments. The relevance of the theme and the expertise level of this audience, however, made me ask for kind hosts to allow me to address a short message to you. The 20 ambitious Aichi biodiversity targets of the 2011-2020 Strategic Plan for Biodiversity established by the Convention on Biological Diversity cannot be achieved without the full contribution and participation of the different levels of governments in each country. In fact, the majority of public investments related to biodiversity and ecosystem services can probably be traced to subnational and local authorities. For these and other reasons, subnational and local governments have been contributing directly to the Convention on Biological Diversity, in particular since 2008, when the first decision on this issue was adopted. Today, more than 30 parties regularly update the Secretariat on their best practices at subnational level, and we're looking forward to the 5th Biennial Summit of Subnational Governments, Cities and Other Local Authorities, parallel to the Convention's 13th meeting of the Conference of the Parties in Cancun, Mexico, to which this prestigious event will provide valuable contributions. States, provinces, regions, prefectures, and other categories of subnational governments, and increasingly mayors and managers of large and influential metropolitan areas, including capital cities, are key players to design and implement ecosystem-level landscape planning and management plans for sustainable services, including water and food security, environmental footprint, management environmental disasters and risk reduction strategies, urban development and ecosystem services, forest and fisheries management, connectivity plans for protected area systems, and integrated biodiversity planning, including capacity building to support the work of local authorities. In recognition of this, parties to the CBD for the 5th consecutive time will consider a decision in Cancun to further engage and assist their subnational and local governments and their partners to more effectively integrate their contribution to the implementation of the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011 to 2020. 2016 is a unique year for subnational governments at the Convention. To begin with, 2016 will witness the Habitat 3 Conference in September in Quito, Ecuador, offering valuable opportunities for the consideration of the summit and the Conference of the Parties. In addition, while the past 4 decisions of the CBD have focused more on actions at the local and urban level, Mexico and over 25 other parties have already taken significant initiatives and share them with the CBD Secretariat to coordinate these effective practice upwards at subnational and national levels. COP13 is the time for these efforts to be further realized. I'm also encouraged by the vigor and promise of the initiative of Mexico as host and president of COP13. Since 2002, the Mexican Council for Biodiversity, CONABIO, supports 22 member states brought together in an association of state environmental authorities in their planning and management capabilities and in initiatives to develop state biodiversity studies reflecting the current state of knowledge on biodiversity and building on these assessments, strategies align with the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans with multi-stakeholder councils to oversee their implementation. COP13's agenda on subnational implementation also builds upon the work program developed by the CBD's Advisory Committee of Subnational Governments, to which Catalonia and others, including members of the Network of Regional Governments for Sustainable Development, at the meetings in Paraná in 2012, Barcelona in 2013, and Korea in 2014 have contributed. Catalonia, São Paulo State, Quebec, Aichi Prefecture, and Rhône-Alpes are leading specific projects and discussions on topics of critical importance to the Convention, such as integrated and aligned biodiversity planning, ecological footprint on global biodiversity, and nature conservation criteria in land use planning policies. In addition, our COP10 host, Aichi Prefecture, has kept engaged with the Secretariat of the CBD and will lead at COP13 a side event towards the establishment of a decentralized cooperation platform on biodiversity. Other subnational governments within NRG4SD are also active in the biodiversity agenda and will be invited to share in Mexico their experiences on the strategies and plans for biodiversity conservation and towards achieving the Aichi targets. This Barcelona conference will be a great opportunity to share experiences, strengthen cooperation, and make joint efforts on the way to Mexico. In the ongoing building capacity for the subnational implementation of MBSAP's project with ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, with the support of the Japan Biodiversity Fund, the Secretariat is consulting with 30 parties and their subnational governments to determine priorities for NBSAP implementation at the subnational level and to produce guidelines for enhanced cooperation between levels of governments for publication at the upcoming summit. Among the preliminary results of interest to this conference, I'd like to highlight some points that might be of relevance to this meeting. A large majority of consulted parties already engage their subnational governments in their biodiversity-related planning and activities, but only about 10% of them do this for a significant range of government levels or through regular and established mechanisms with goals, strategies, programs, or action plans. Similarly, the majority of subnational governments consulted are quite familiar with their MBSAP and the convention. Around 50% of them actually have their own strategies and even sets of measurable targets and goals on biodiversity. But most can still identify challenges and needs for capacity building for improvement of this cooperation. Although developed countries tend to describe more consistent mechanisms for the engagement of subnational governments, creativity and effectiveness in this cooperation is not correlated with wealth or development levels. Many least developed countries and small island development states have remarkably effective mechanisms for subnational and local implementation. Reflecting our main issue, there is an impressive diversity and complexity not only in the different governance arrangements and mandates among parties for coordination across levels of governments, but also in the ways, means, and tools used to consult, involve, and share responsibilities and activities between national, subnational, and local. To summarize, we are finding that biodiversity actually means different things in terms of needs, expectations, and policy and governance resources required, depending on the level of governance. Challenges and actions needed at the national level are essentially different in nature and practice from those of states, provinces, and regions, which in their turn are different from those at metropolitan, urban, and borough levels. Identifying these differences and responding to their different requirement needs to be part of all mechanisms or tools for coordination. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in view of all of the above, I encourage you during this conference to consider how to create and establish a more permanent working or advisory group on subnational action for biodiversity in order to support parties and to make the subnational voice be heard by our 196 parties in Cancun. Congratulating Catalonia for its leadership, I'd like to thank Minister Raul for his initiative to organize this meeting together with NRG4SD, and to close by inviting all of you to contribute to this conference's goals. I look forward to seeing most of you at the Summit of Subnational Governments, Cities, and Other Local Authorities parallel to CBD COP13 in Cancun next December. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. De Souza. Thank you, conseller, alcalde de Manresa. Gràcies per les seves paraules també i ja poden abandonar l'escenari si volen. Gràcies. Ara és el moment de començar a entrar en matèria. Començarem amb una primera xerrada, amb una primera presentació, que és aquest panel titulat Governança global a la biodiversitat, coherència, coordinació i cooperació. Serà moderat per Puri Canals, ho direm bé, Puri Canals, que és la presidenta, com sabeu ja, de la xarxa d'àrees mediterrànies marines protegides. Hi haurà diversos panelistes, esperem que ens arribi, perquè hem tingut alguns problemes també amb els avions, amb retards, si és l'Or Ledoux, la sotsdirectora de la Unitat de Biodiversitat, la Direcció General de Medi Ambient de la Comissió Europea, sí que hi és la Natalia Vera, coordinadora d'Afers Interns d'Energy Forest D, i Joan Puigmenech, en aquest cas el regidor de Medi Ambient i comissionat per la participació ciutadana de l'Ajuntament de Sant Cugat del Vallès. Per tant, li donarem la paraula ja a la Puri Canals, com dèiem, del Medban, aquesta entitat que agrupa, com sabeu més d'un de vosaltres, prop de 100 institucions i ONGs també, que tenen responsabilitats directes d'alguna manera sobre gestió de les àrees marines protegides o que estan involucrades en el desenvolupament de les àrees marines protegides del Mediterrani. Aquests agents acaben gestionant prop de 90 àrees protegides, en aquest cas, i que formen part de 18 països mediterranis. Endavant, doncs. Sí, funciona?
Moltes gràcies. Primer que res, bona tarda. Good afternoon, everyone.
El micròfon em sembla que no està funcionant.
Ara sí? Sí. Doncs deia, bona tarda, good
Endavant.
afternoon, everyone. So, in substitution of the person coming from the European Commission, we are glad to invite our friend Luc Bas from IUCN in Europe, and I think he can really compensate and have a good contribution to this roundtable. So, first of all, I will start in introducing all the participants, because we have a very diverse panel. Here we have Natalia Vera, that she's the Internal Affairs Coordinator of the Network of Regional Governments for Sustainable Development, Energy Forest D, and member of the research group Zaragoza European and International Studies. She holds a degree in law from the University of Zaragoza and Masters in European Union Affairs by the Royal Institute of European Studies and Masters in Law for the Environmental Planning by the University of Zaragoza. We have also Joan Puigmenech. He's Councillor for the Environment and the Commissioner for Citizen Participation in the Sant Cugat del Vallès City Council. He's a professor at the Polytechnic University of Catalonia, and he has a PhD on physical sciences. And obviously, I start by Luc Bas. He's the current director of IUCN office for Europe in Brussels, and I will allow himself to introduce because I don't have his CV, so you can share something more about your background.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here and to jump in where needed. I'm very happy to do that because I will start by saying that I'm a big supporter and believer of the role of subnational governments in the global space and, of course, in implementing all these agreements that ultimately fall on the shoulders of subnational governments and local governments. So I have a background in a subnational government. I was in the Flemish government. I've worked for the federal government on sustainable development, and I negotiated both the CSDs, the Commission on Sustainable Development, and then I went into climate change. I've been negotiating also for the Belgian government there in different COPs of the UNFCCC. And then I worked for an NGO in which we gathered quite a few very leading regional governments from all over the world on climate change, and that was a focus on energy and clean revolution. And then ultimately, 3 years ago, I became the European director for IUCN in Brussels, And since then, of course, I work a lot with all our NGO members, all our state members, but I'm also making or trying to push for more activity and more integration and more recognition of subnational governments and local governments in IUCN.
Thank you very much. I think that with this background, you fit perfectly in this roundtable. So thank you for accepting the last moment change. So we are going to discuss in our group a little bit about the governance issues related to these different levels of action regarding the Aichi targets. So, you know, Aichi targets are very easy to read. You put the Google and you find all this long list of targets very clearly defined. But then the implementation is not easy. It's a social challenge, a real social challenge. So normally at the CBD COP, the decisions are taken by the state governance, the national governance, but then the implementation doesn't finish there. So we have to do actions on the ground. And these actions on the ground often, and especially in democratic countries, have to be done in agreement with the different levels of the public administration organization in each country. So that means that there is a place, an important place for regional or subnational governments. You know, there's a large set of names for these subnational governments. So I will not mention all of them because it changed a lot. But the subnational governments have a lot of responsibilities. In the case, for instance, here in Catalonia, in this context of Spain, the autonomous governments have clear competences in the management and the actions for biodiversity. So that means that those actions that are done at this subnational level needs to be in coordination with what is agreed at the national one, but not only at the national one, at the international one, because this comes from the context of an international convention, and in our case, in Europe, also comes from all the European directives that are in agreement with what the CBD decides. But this is not finishing here. Also cities, also villages at the city council level, there is a lot of actions that can be done and must be done there. And the real challenge is really how to coordinate and how to cooperate and not just fight, which is unfortunately also that happens quite often between public administrations. So here, when we talk about biodiversity, we need to talk always about cooperation, about coordination, about integrating actions. And this is the objective of our roundtable discussion. So how to do this? So certainly it's not easy, but I think that it requires, first of all, an open regard. You cannot just do what you have in front of you without understanding what's happening next to these actions and in a whole context. That's why it's important to have this subsidiarity approach, but understand that what you have to do every day comes from a large overview. And obviously, also, when you are negotiating in a COP, you need to know how the final results of your negotiations are going to fit in a specific context, not just in general terms, but you need to imagine at least how in your country, in your region, in your village, what's going to happen if you apply those decisions. So this requires, as I say, a lot of coordination. So this is the main objective of our discussion, and I will start just with the most international level. In this case, it's look back that you are going to provide your good background, just because you have different levels of taking decisions for biodiversity. And the question we have prepared was more focusing on the European Union, but as you are in a European position for IUCN, I will put the question and we will adapt it to the context, also looking from the point of view of an international organization, and this is the case of IUCN. IUCN, for those of you that maybe are not familiar, is a quite complex institution that joins governments at national level, but also other kinds of agencies, governmental agencies, that includes obviously the subnational level and the municipal level, but also NGOs, national and international NGOs with more than 100 members in the world. So it is the largest institution dealing with biodiversity issues. So I think that is appropriate. So I'm going just to formulate the question and then you provide your input on this. So European Union is also composed by different national governments, even though it has a long track experience in working with cities and regions. So in Europe has cooperation at many different levels. Also in fostering a territorial approach, how this regional structure engage and collaborates with subnational and local levels. And I will suggest, this was the question for European Union, I will suggest how IUCN and the relationships between IUCN and European institutions really can contribute to these actions and to these coordinations.
Thank you. Thank you, Puri. That's a very large question, and I could launch into my presentation that will come later, the keynote later. But so I'll try not to release everything that I will be saying then. And maybe I will try to focus on the European level, without wanting to say that at the international level, IUCN is now accelerating and strengthen its collaboration through a new project that wants to look at specifically at the integration of nature and biodiversity through excellence and leadership at a subnational level in implementing nature-based solutions. And that's a global exercise, and it's going to meet, it has met in Paris with the political representatives that are there in that steering committee for this project that is called World Environment Hubs. But as environment can be so much, and IUCN has clearly also a niche where it works, we have decided that this project will focus on how to better implement these nature-based solutions. And for some, this may sound new. I don't hope in this group it will be new, but I can bet you that in the European Union, for example, it took us 2 years to convince the Commission, and it's a pity that the Commission is not here now, to start using this term, because there are quite a few criteria for it, and it's still under development. So these nature-based solutions have to contribute to solving a societal challenge. It is, of course, based on the ecosystems and how the ecosystems provide the solution or part of the solution. So that's the whole exercise that we're doing internationally. Of course, we want to translate this also into Europe, which is then my immediate responsibility as the director for Europe. And we are, I must still say that we are trying to, or we had a few preliminary meetings to try to establish a specific platform for European regions to, first of all, to create a little bit of a race to the top, because we want to work with leadership. And I can say that I know from quite a few regions that are participating today that are already been involved, Catalonia not in the least, but quite a few others, to show leadership, to exchange it, to learn from each other. Obviously, what do you do in a network? And in that context, I think we have to work very closely with the existing networks, obviously. We don't want to duplicate. There's no use in doing that, so we have to really see how we coordinate properly with the network of regional governments for sustainable development, also with ICLE, as you know, one of the largest networks of local governments. Let me also add to that, that as we know there's, and this is with all respect to the commune of Sant, I have to help me now, Sant Cugat, but I think when we want to add to what is already happening, the choice that we've made in Brussels with at least this European regions platform is to focus really at that very level, first level underneath the national, the subnational level, and also to really do it with them. If you look at the European context, I think Europe is championing with the Committee of the Regions. I think there's nothing alike in the world at an international or supranational level, that there is an institution that deals with the local and subnational governments. But we all know that this is a big mix of very different constituencies, and it has its important contribution, but when we can add to it, it's because we recognize that these subnational governments have very specific policy responsibilities. Responsibilities come with competencies and come with powers, of course. And so very often, and in many examples in Europe, but also outside of Europe, the national governments, especially in the nature context or in conservation, protected areas, restoration, it is very much a subnational competence and a policy competence, not only an implementation point. So that's what we try to do. We want to nurture this. We are still looking for partners. also regions, and of course funders. So if there is any foundation in the room that feels starts to get interested, let us know. Because this needs to be funded. Such a platform is a constant exchange, and it's something that we have to push for. I think the same challenges are for other networks that seek support. So that as an introductory comment. I could go into detail which competences these are, but basically, when we look at these nature-based solutions, for us, the ones that can make a real difference are the subnational governments.
I think that the majority of the room agrees with that we will open the discussion to our public later. Now we'll ask Natalia about regional governments are known by many names worldwide, we know, and for example, intermediary governments. So this is interesting because it's exactly what defines often the role. In being the level between national and local governments, how do regions ensure coordination, cohesion, and collaboration among them, and also at the global level?
Well, just thank you, Puri. Actually, this is one of the tasks that we develop in the Network of Regional Governments for Sustainable Development. We try to ensure that the international agreements regarding biodiversity, sustainability, climate change, environment are well implemented at subnational level. Indeed, subnationals, we have a really crucial role. As you said, we are sometimes called intermediary, and that's really enlightening in the sense that it shows that we are intermediate in the subnational level and local, so we are between the national and the local, and in that sense we are a crucial nexus to ensure that these international agreements are properly implemented and go down in cascade. So from the Network of Regional Governments for Sustainable Development, we have different projects and initiatives that tend to assist our members, subnational governments, to really implement on the ground in their territories these international agreements in coherence with the national level, and to help the local levels also to achieve those measures. For instance, as we are in a biodiversity forum, I will say that we have recently launched a learning platform on biodiversity. This was a suggestion made by the Secretariat of the CVD itself. They invited us to create a core group that could exchange technical expertise with regards to biodiversity strategies and action plans. So we held already one meeting of this pilot project, and really the results were excellent. So what we're going to do now is match the capacities we have identified with gaps, and we will try to create partnerships among these subnationals. So it's not only a question of making effective this implementation of international agreements at the low level, subnational level, local level, but it's also a question of having solidarity among all subnational governments, helping each other, because at the end we all have competences, we all are in the same level, we all are binded by these international agreements, and we need to help each other. So sharing experiences and sharing expertise is crucial in these regards. We also developed other initiatives that do not fall directly into biodiversity, but always tending to help subnationals to fulfill these international agreements and to be in accordance with the national level and help the locals. For instance, in terms of climate change, we have these Regions Adapt initiative that we launched in the last COP in Paris, super successful experience with more than 50 subnational governments across the world working in climate adaptation. And we also are working now in the guide of implementation of the SDGs that were approved last September. It is crucial that we subnationals are able to implement effectively these measures, because really decentralized countries, and there are many, most of these measures fall under the competences of subnationals, so we have a crucial role to play, and Energy First assists subnational governments to develop that.
Thank you very much. I think we are just providing more content about the specific role. So now for Joan. Els governs locals, tot dic en català, els governs locals són els últims responsables per la implementació a nivell de base, amb l'objectiu de millorar la seva eficiència. Com podem intercanviar de manera descentralitzada per poder tenir un model de coordinació que ens permeti realment ser més efectius amb els nivells locals per la conservació de la biodiversitat. Això d'estar a prop de terra, com podem fer que això sigui més eficient? Llavors, què és el que podem fer diferent a nivell local?
Bé, deixi'm parlar des de nivell de terra, ja que m'ho ha posat així, i deixi'm que miri els altres dos nivells que dèiem d'administració i quines són les possibilitats de col·laborar. Doncs, típicament en l'ambient de l'administració local, el que tractem són de casos com molt particulars. Deixin-me que parli amb exemples, amb 2 o 3 exemples frapants dintre del que és l'administració local i anem a veure quin podria ser una imatge de col·laboració entre els diferents graus de governança que a mi em sembla que podrien funcionar. El que sí que és cert és que en el que fa referència a l'administració local van progressant o estan augmentant tota una sèrie de ferides en el territori que van parcel·lant el territori i, de fet, van parcel·lant tots aquests sectors o tots aquests hàbitats naturals del que és la biodiversitat en general. En parlaré de 3 i en particular veuran vostès el nivell i el grau de necessitat de cooperació que tenim des d'arran de terra dels diferents nivells de governança. Una de les primeres ferides, que són ferides que es van fent en el territori, ferides que jo crec que mereixen una determinada reflexió, són les ferides que produeixen les infraestructures lligades a la mobilitat. Aquest és un tema molt important, i que requereix una reflexió, sobretot de les administracions, que segurament són les de nivell 1. No em facin parlar de si estic parlant d'estatal nacional, que aquí ens farem un lío, aquí a Catalunya ens fem un lío quan parlem d'això, però en qualsevol cas ja s'entén que existeix un nivell d'administració o de responsabilitat o de competència en el que fa les infraestructures de mobilitat que jo crec que requereixen una reflexió important. El problema de la mobilitat no es resol incrementant el nivell d'infraestructures de mobilitat, sinó reflexionant amb el tipus de mobilitat. Aquest és un tema molt important. La gent, les persones, la gent que viu en les ciutats i tal, no necessiten més infraestructures de mobilitat. La gent que viu en les ciutats necessita resoldre la seva mobilitat, que és una altra cosa totalment diferent. Doncs, per tant, la primera de les coses en aquest capítol és que les administracions o els nivells de governabilitat que decideixen sobre la planificació del territori haurien de fer una primera pregunta abans de qualsevol nova infraestructura de mobilitat o ampliació d'infraestructura de mobilitat és si és necessària. Aquesta és la primera pregunta. La primera pregunta no és per on passarà una infraestructura, sinó si és necessària. I a continuació, un altre dels temes d'important col·laboració entre el nivell màxim de governança, els governs que n'hem dit subnacionals i els governs locals, és precisament veure com podem promoure sistemes de mobilitat que resolguin la mobilitat dels ciutadans sense necessitat d'incrementar o augmentar les infraestructures de mobilitat que produeixen ferides en el territori que són totalment una amenaça per la conservació de la biodiversitat. Aquest és un primer tema. Un altre tema molt important, una altra ferida que tenim en el territori, una ferida que últimament fins i tot progressa massa inadequadament, són les infraestructures lligades al transport d'energia. Aquest és un altre tema molt important. És un tema molt important que, bé, crec que hem d'evolucionar cap a sistemes de producció d'energia descentralitzada, de tal manera que les necessitats d'infraestructura de transport d'energia no ens fereixen al territori i no ens parcel·lin els hàbitats naturals que nosaltres tenim. Aquest és un tema molt important. Jo quasi que diria, bé, això pot quedar en el terreny de la filosofia. No, això, el mes de setembre, en aquest país, ja podríem tindre un petit moviment que seria la retirada d'un decret falsament dit d'autoconsum d'energia, que aquest Real Decret el que fa és que sigui impossible la utilització de l'autoconsum en aquest país, de l'autoconsum d'energia. Per tant, aquest és un... O sigui, estic parlant de coses molt properes i molt casolanes, estic parlant de l'administració local. Per tant, en principi, doncs, la primera de les coses seria, una cosa ben important, la retirada d'un decret que obstaculitza d'una forma important l'autoconsum d'energia i en particular de la producció i consum d'energia pràcticament a nivell local. Aquest és un altre tema molt important i està lligat exactament amb aquestes ferides que n'estem provocant en el territori. Si nosaltres tenim producció i consum d'energia de manera localitzada, no necessitarem transportar l'energia a altes distàncies. Com a mínim, resoldrem en gran part aquest tipus de problemes que anem generant en el territori. Un altre dels temes relacionats també amb la biodiversitat i que ens atanyen molt en l'administració local és el tema de la gestió forestal respectuosa, gestió forestal dels espais naturals, respectuosa amb la biodiversitat. Estem fent, bé, quan la fem, quan realment podem arribar a fer-la, estem fent gestió forestal, però no sé si estem resolent solament el tema de tindre uns boscos exclusivament des d'un punt de vista forestal equilibrats, però estem moltes vegades foragitant tota una sèrie de vida que viu en aquests boscos. Per tant, s'hauria de parlar una mica exactament com hem de fer aquest tractament, aquesta gestió forestal que sigui realment responsable i que ens permeti aquest tipus d'allò. Per tant, jo, finalment, ja que parlem de col·laboració i no em voldria, evidentment no us he parlat del tema de gestió de costes, vinc d'una ciutat que està en l'interior, per tant, segurament parlaria malament d'aquest tipus de temes, però, en qualsevol cas, no voldria acabar aquí la meva exposició sense desfer un nivell d'intranquil·litat que em produeix a vegades aquest tipus de discussions en les quals parlem de 3 nivells de governança. N'hi ha un quart nivell de governança que m'agradaria posar-lo aquí. Existeix, i cada vegada és més present a les nostres ciutats, entitats de ciutadans que treballen en el medi ambient, que tenen els seus objectius lligats a medi ambient. Existeix fins i tot moviments que jo crec que des d'un punt de vista de la biodiversitat els hauríem d'afavorir, que són agrupacions que sense ànim de confrontació política amb l'administració local es posen reptes de tipus ambiental i es posen reptes de tipus fins i tot biològic per millorar els seus hàbitats, fins i tot amb una certa independència i autogestió de la pròpia administració local. Això que a vegades a l'administració local li fa una certa basarda, una certa por, perquè sembla que es descontroli, doncs, per exemple, moviments com aquests que coneixem i fan una certa feina, aquests que en diem ciutats en transició, transition towns, jo crec que aquests els hi hauríem de donar una certa valoració i el nivell 3 d'administració el que hauria de fer és ajudar al nivell 4 de l'administració a resoldre temes de profunditat en el tema de la biodiversitat com són aquest tipus de moviments. Gràcies.
Thank you. I think that your contributions help me to follow with a next step in our debate, because you just raised the issue on who is the responsible to really make this collaboration possible. So I've been following for years the COPs of the CBD, the SABSTA, the meetings for the subsidiary body for technical and technological advice, many events. And there is not a lot of a big number of subnational governments being present at these meetings. So finally, it seems that the responsibility in our mind is that, okay, the government with the minister, when the minister comes back from Cancun, he or she will have to give to us a set of recommendations to do at the different levels. But this is not the case, it's not how things are happening. So those kind of initiatives at some national levels and local levels are important, but sometimes we also need catalyzers, external catalyzers. And I think that this role is, for instance, is what the network that I'm chairing in the Mediterranean is doing. So let me just share with you, because I think it's the interest, that MedPan, 4 years ago, we co-organized the Mediterranean Forum for Marine Protected Areas. This is Aichi Target 11. And we co-organized with the Regional Activity Center for Especially Protected Areas of the Barcelona Convention, this forum. And everybody asked, okay, what we are going to do in this forum, what's the main objective? Well, it's just make people exchanging, but we decide to be very precise in our objectives, and we develop a roadmap towards 2020, looking at the objective of the Aichi Target 11 for the region. And we develop in a participatory manner, in a way that we have a set of recommendations that can be done at the international level, in the whole basin, at national level, but that's also a local level, and with many other actors. And this is just a tool that didn't exist previously. Just looking at what the governments had approved, but then how we can help those governments to implement. And I think these kind of tools that allows to identify how under the same objective you can act from different positions are really, really useful. And I would like to listen from you if you have other experiences of what can be the places that can serve as catalyzers of this coordination. I think IUCN is also doing these roles often in several initiatives, but collaboration is easier when you talk about state, national level to national level, subnational to subnational, local to local. We have a network of cities and municipalities in Catalonia. We have a program of work for protected areas. But how we can really make possible these other exchanges with also social actors, how the social actors can really trigger the institutions to work together.
Well, I can follow up a little bit on a few things that have been said, if you let me. And I want to come back on that coordination, which is actually a vertical and a horizontal coordination that needs to happen at the same time, which makes it all complex. And then when it gets so complex, everybody loses the thread and nothing happens. So you always will have to break down the complexity into very specifics, because otherwise it's not going to happen. So just as a general remark. And maybe on your points, which I think was very interesting, that you summed up all these, let's say these, you can say these external threats to nature and habitats, and we've seen all the damage being done in the past, and unfortunately we see only a little bit of a diversion from that path, and still many developments are really not taking that into account. And I can speak for my own Flemish region, Flanders, where we still make decisions that you honestly can't believe that these happen. We will have, I give you a very concrete example. I'm not shy to say this. We have a plan and a permit for a big shopping mall again. At the same time, when in the US, shopping malls are being deserted and people don't like it anymore and they want to go shopping in nicer, smaller shops. In Flanders, they're going to build, it's called A Place, you can Google it if you want, close to Brussels, and it's going to create one big mess on all fronts. But there will be jobs in the retail, in those shops there. And so you only look at that part of the result of what you're going to do. So you need to, what we need to do is to look at these impact assessments in a horizontal way, that means between the sectors, but also very much in the vertical way. And that still doesn't happen enough. So these impact assessments are crucial. Then you have these environment impact assessments. They have been quite well developed, especially in Europe, I think. Then you got into the strategic environment assessments. And then, but it never really got institutionalized, you have the sustainability impact assessments, which there are a few examples which are quite interesting because they then take into account the socioeconomic elements a bit more. The point is that it doesn't really have an institutional home, and it is not always being rigorously executed. So the tools are there, but honestly, it's really some political decisions and political will to really make them happen. And this brings me back to you. This is where leadership comes in, where you have to see where, at which level, or in which countries, or in which continents, or at the national level, or even at a supranational level like Europe, although leadership is kind of a bit in the mist now, but let's not go there today. So you have to see leadership, and coming back to subnational governments, yes, you have to implement, yes, you have to do what has been decided at the top level. Yes, you need better instruments to be able to have your say at this level, and I heard the executive secretary actually calling for a more and even better organized coordination and input into the CBD, and I think the CBD is a forerunner in all of this. UNFCCC is now also following, so things are moving. But to finalize, you need to show that leadership, and that leadership in a region or at the local level can actually push that national ambition. Because at some point the national level gets embarrassed. And that is where that power and that leadership, when you can show it in clear results, then can actually move those national levels, and then the decision among those national levels can become more interesting, can become more ambitious. And I don't want to go into examples, I'm sure that people here are quite familiar, but I'll give you one. That is the one from the US, the famous US example of California. The California, and that's, sorry, it's not about biodiversity for once, but it's all tied together as we know, but it was the climate ambition of California that definitely has pushed the lever also for the US. And I think there's many more examples around. So that, I think, is a really important thing, and therefore such a network, or what we try to do also within IUCN with those governments to then have direct access to those state members, is something that we just need more of.
Thank you. Natalia, do you have examples on that?
Yeah, actually, I couldn't agree more with Luke. Indeed, we subnational governments are sometimes inspiring to nationals. We are braver. We are not that subject to other tides that at national level are existing. So we are more free, and at the same time we have competences. We create our own laws, we create our own policies, we can create strategies, action plans. So we have means and we have the courage. And that's why sometimes when you find leadership at subnational level, this can be very inspiring, both to the national level, to the international, or to the local. So taking back your question on how these difficult coordination, vertical, horizontal, trying to engage also stakeholders, all governmental levels. Yeah, it is a difficult question, and it is essential that there's agreement and goodwill from all sides. In this sense, national level should be providing the necessary structure, the necessary guidance, and the necessary funding to subnationals to, at the same time, support the locals. So it should be like a ideal coordination happening that time. At international level, it is crucial to hear what's happening on the ground. We, locals and subnationals, are closer to citizens. It's better for us, I mean, we have a better position to stay tuned with them. We really can listen, we can really see what's happening in the territory. We're closer to the issues, we're closer to the solutions. So in this sense, we are a crucial element that can bring essential bottom-up information and details, so that at international level, decision-making can be done in a realistic way. And we can also, from the subnational level, liaise very well with other stakeholders, academia, NGOs, researchers. This input is also very valuable. So I would say, yes, leadership, as Luke pointed out, but also wide regard, as you said, like including everyone, inclusive work. So that would be, and this is what we try to do from Energy4SD and our members, some of them are here, so they could maybe, when we open the floor, state some things.
Thank you. Well, yesterday I had the opportunity to work for 10 minutes with you in your working group, and I think it's also interesting to remind for the public in the room that in the society, as Joan said, there are often initiatives that if there is a goodwill at the local, subnational or national level to listen and to exchange with these people, things can be improved easily. So it's the case, for instance, here in Catalonia, 100 professionals from the conservation world, coming from 15 different disciplines, we decide to work together and we create a platform that is called Conservation Cat. Okay, I think it's easy to understand. Cat. It's not from cats, it's from Catalonia. So, and we start identifying the current situation in the country. I will not tell all the details. And we develop an action plan. And from this work, then we went to connect, to exchange with all the political parties before the elections, and later with the current government. And we established, I think, a very interesting collaboration, unusual because, well, it's a kind of lobby that is based on the knowledge, on the real knowledge of people that is spread in all the territory of Catalonia. And this provides a direct feedback on what's going on. And it can go to the level that Joan said, that what's happening with certain infrastructure in a certain specific kilometer, because there's there where we will do the big damage, not maybe in 100 kilometers, but in a certain point it's important. And you need this connection with the people that knows and can advise and can exchange. So I think those are examples in which obviously a subnational level is easier. It will be more difficult to go, for instance, for us to Madrid to have this kind of communication. I don't know if Joan wants to add something to this level.
Sí, jo l'únic que volia afegir és que, efectivament, a mi em sembla que el nivell més eficient de coordinació entre tots aquests nivells de governança jo crec que és el nivell subnacional. No diré que és el nivell local, perquè, efectivament, és el que ens permet a moltes administracions locals que tenim problemes, tenim regions naturals, per exemple, aquí, en aquest cas, hem vist la Serra de Collserola, la compartim diferents municipis i necessitem aquest nivell d'administració subnacional que d'alguna forma ens doni un cert moviment. Per tant, jo diria que aquest nivell subnacional és el nivell, des del meu punt de vista i per temes de biodiversitat, el nivell més eficient. O sigui, no el reivindico des del nivell local. Des del nivell local se'ns queda estret, hi ha problemes que se'ns escapen del nostre àmbit i, en canvi, al nivell subnacional no es dissemina aquest problema en zones que no tenen contacte entre elles. Aquest nivell jo crec que és crucial des del meu punt de vista.
Moltes gràcies. Well, I will now... Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it was very interesting to hear your point of view, especially being a major from a village, so from a town. In this sense, I fully understand your point of view because, indeed, we think when we think about locals, we think like huge towns like Barcelona, New York, Sao Paulo. I mean, these big cities, of course, they have resources, human, economic, capacities, everything. But we don't need to forget these little villages in the territory, rural places, which are key to ensure biodiversity, these biodiversity, nature-based solutions. These are the ones that can preserve ecosystems. These ones are the ones we need to cherish. And these little ones, they don't have enough human resources, enough economical resources, enough capacities, enough training. So it is our responsibility as subnationals to help them, to assist them, to coordinate them, all of them, to structure them, guidance, funding, everything. So yes, we have a key role, but we also have a big responsibility with these rural areas, little towns.
Yeah, and the issue is even more complex when we talk about the coast. Because we are talking about even what were used to be small villages are not anymore small villages, and the economic perspectives and economic possibilities are huge. So it certainly requests a whole view on the whole coast of a certain region, because otherwise the decisions can be really, really bad for the nature. So I will not enter on this exactly, but I think that now is the moment in which it will be interesting to give the floor to the participants, because I'm sure that you can have good questions or good comments to do and to contribute. We have still 10 minutes. Yes, please.
I'm Martina from São Paulo, from the State Secretariat for the Environment of São Paulo. And this conversation was very interesting, and Joan in particular. I was thinking about these two dynamics. For one, many times the municipalities, they are very small and have few human resources and also few economic resources. But on the other hand, I think they have an invaluable strength, which is that they're so close to the people. They can actually involve their citizens, because many times the mayor of the city knows all of the citizens of the little towns in the villages. And Joan, I would like to know if you have had any experience with that in Sant Cugat. I hope I pronounced that right. How we can, through the cities, through the mayorships, involve the citizens to really get them on board to protect biodiversity. Thank you.
Bé, efectivament, bé, jo no sóc alcalde, però bueno, algun dia potser ho acabaré sent, però en qualsevol cas, sí, jo vinc d'una ciutat que més o menys té 90.000 habitants, o sigui, ja té un cert número, però si parléssim de zones fins i tot d'aquesta ciutat, zones, el que en diem barris, etc., el que sí notem és que s'està produint, i ho estem afavorint, d'un cert nivell d'autoorganització de les poblacions. Perquè en realitat aquestes poblacions, quan arribin a identificar-se en què d'alguna forma són els jardiners d'un tros de la ciutat, o sigui, que tenen a la seva responsabilitat aquest tipus de coses, efectivament aquestes ciutats cuidaran i vetllaran el territori no com una cosa que hi ha una administració que vetlla, sinó com una part de la natura que els entre cometes, pertany. Els pertany no en propietat, els pertany en la cura, que aquest és veritablement el tema. Jo em sembla molt interessant aquest flux que s'està produint ara en aquests moments, en els quals els ciutadans comencen a tenir la impressió que una part de la gestió de les ciutats els pertany. Això pot, diguem-ne, des d'un punt de vista de la política tradicional, li pot semblar a determinada gent fins i tot un cert descontrol, però és, des del meu punt de vista, un aprofundiment del que entenem per democràcia. I per tant, jo crec que aquesta és la direcció amb la qual correctament hi hem d'anar.
Any other question? Don't be shy.
I will entertain you a bit while you think about your next question. I want to come to this famous word, the subsidiarity, the mystic, all-summarizing word. And this means, I think it's, first of all, it's a dynamic thing. Because subsidiarity, sometimes you have defined it in good confidence that you do those things and you give the responsibility and the competences to those level of government that you think do it right, can do it right, have the right instruments to do it right, And then, of course, you have to define what right is. That's another debate. This also means, when it's dynamic, that at some point, when you see the discussion evolve, the needs evolve, the challenges evolve, that you may have this subsidiarity as a result. You have to sometimes maybe also give away competencies. And that's quite a controversial issue, which means from the subnational to the local, because honestly, we can't manage it. It's actually better at the local. And then it gets tricky, and let's go from subnational to Europe. That's easier. So you realize that some things are better dealt with at the European level. Unfortunately, we have seen that it's not been well explained in Europe, given the results in the UK. But you have to accept it often. You have to sometimes accept to give power away as well for what you want to reach. And then, of course, you have to come to the point, what is it what you want to reach? And then it gets quite tricky, because if you look, and I will give you an example for local governments that sometimes have such local and very local focused interests that they forget about what is in their environment actually has a global value or a European value. The Bialowice forest in Poland is a very good example. This is World Heritage Site. There's nothing like it in Europe. It's the last remaining lowland primeval forest. So Europe has an interest, the world has an interest to preserve it. And then you come to this point where, okay, if you want to do it, how are you going to tell the local people that they should not go and harvest their wood for fuel? So if you want to do that, then you will have to compensate it in a way. So it comes always back to how you finance, how you give somehow a financial value to this. So you will have to avoid it, you will have to give a contribution. And then where I want to end with my point is that we, in this community of biodiversity and nature, we have to start daring to look. We already do at all values, and we have to look at it broader. So there's value and there is price. But if you have to start looking at some of the economic value of this natural capital, because otherwise you will never make the point with the decision makers that are looking in that context. And so I think a crucial role for subnational governments is to help assess those ecosystem services. I think there's quite some leadership already here in the room. By the way, to make up for before, I need to say to the Flemish government that they actually do a great job in assessing these ecosystem services. I think they're one of the leaders there. So you see, it cannot always be all good and all bad. Huh? So that's really, and Catalonia, I think, has also quite some leadership, and I've seen it in Quebec. And I should be careful not making the comprehensive list, but that's really crucial. If we do not go there, if we don't find a way to really give that also economic value to the ecosystem services, we will be talking in deaf men's ears. And I think, again, local governments, but then you have the tools more often at the subnational level to make it happen. We will release a natural capital protocol with IUCN that has been developed with the business community, by the way, in 2 weeks' time. So keep an eye on it.
Thank you. Any question? Yes, please.
Buenas tardes, soy Marcelino Chumpi, prefecto de una provincia del Ecuador, en la Amazonía, Morona, Santiago. Si bien es cierto, ha sido muy interesante la conversación, yo tengo dos preguntas, si ustedes me pueden ayudar. Los territorios locales siempre tienen una definición en cuanto se refiere a los planes estratégicos, planes de desarrollo y pues una proyección muy grande. Pero resulta que cuando los gobiernos centrales necesitan de recursos, esos planes no sirven para nada. No sirven las autonomías, no sirven las ordenanzas locales, porque es interés estratégico del Estado. ¿Cómo hacer entonces en esta primera parte que los territorios que tienen una definición en cuanto a riqueza, biodiversidad, por ejemplo en mi provincia, somos la provincia ecológica, turística, libre de contaminación ambiental declarado por todo el pueblo de Morón de Santiago, pero el gobierno necesita sacar petróleo y las minas y le importa un pepino aquella situación. allí cómo combinar entre esto del interés de desarrollo local territorial y el interés central del gobierno. Eso por un lado. Por otro lado, quisiera preguntarles a ustedes, porque también hay una burocracia internacional. Entonces la Unión Europea, Fondo Monetario, BEBID y todo lo demás podemos hablar. Pero yo me pregunto, ¿cómo poder hacer mucho más efectivo la cooperación? Por ejemplo, nosotros somos parte de una red de desarrollo sostenible, pero como que a nivel de gobiernos subnacionales no podemos tener una relación directa, porque toca pasar por el gobierno central, aprobado, y el Congreso y todo lo demás, y nos quedamos en las buenas intenciones. ¿Qué pueden hacer ustedes por nosotros, al menos que estamos viviendo esta situación en mi provincia, en mi territorio de Morón, Santiago, procurando de que la biodiversidad o la mega biodiversidad que tenemos sea una parte, un patrimonio intangible nuestro, pero a la vez que pueda servir a la comunidad internacional y ahí pues entrar a la cooperación? ¿Qué podrían hacer ustedes para poder romper tal vez la burocracia internacional y entrar a cooperar directamente de gobiernos subnacionales, de gobiernos locales? Muchas gracias.
¿Quieres responder?
Gracias por esta pregunta tan pertinentemente traída. El prefecto, como miembro de Agrarian, ya sabes que dentro de nuestra red precisamente promovemos la colaboración entre gobiernos subnacionales. Estas relaciones se denominan paradiplomacia, es decir, están paralelamente a la diplomacia tradicional. La diplomacia tradicional, como todos ustedes saben, jurídicamente está protagonizada por estados soberanos y por organizaciones internacionales. Esos son los sujetos de derecho internacional. ¿Qué ocurre? Que no son los únicos que tienen relaciones internacionales. En este mundo globalizado es obvio. Y ahí es donde entramos locales, subnacionales, ONGs internacionales y otros actores internacionales, incluso colectividades indígenas. Todo convive en la actualidad, pero todo tiene que llevar un orden legal internacional, ateniéndose al derecho internacional público. Por tanto, nivel de actores, siempre nos regimos por memorandos de entendimiento, acuerdos de colaboración, cartas de intenciones, pero esa colaboración existe. A nivel de derecho internacional público, es decir, sujetos internacionales, tratados internacionales, que nos afectan a todos al final. Y por eso es importante que nosotros, subnacionales, locales, juntos, colaborando, a través de organizaciones como Biodiversity, por ejemplo, podamos influir, podamos participar, ser partícipes de esas negociaciones e influirlas.
Bueno, la verdad es, nos pregunta qué pueden hacer. Supongo que dentro de unos años nos dirá qué es lo que ha hecho y aprenderemos de usted, básicamente, ¿no? Pero yo creo que hay una experiencia muy interesante que a lo mejor, no lo sé, a lo mejor le podría servir, que es esta experiencia del Pacto de Alcaldes a nivel de Unión Europea. Dicho de otra forma, a veces las cosas no pasan por los estados, ni tan solo incluso por las entidades ¿cómo? Subnacionales, se le llama, sí, subnacionales, sino a veces en los retos que diferentes poblaciones cercanas, y en este caso no tan cercanas, pero se reúnen y bueno, a su nivel van fijando una serie de objetivos y de retos de las poblaciones que a mí me parece interesante y me parece que lo que hemos vivido con el Pacto de Alcaldes en la Unión Europea me parece interesante. Por el otro lado, la primera pregunta era más difícil, ¿no? Seguramente me equivoco de traducirla, ¿no? Cómo combatir, dijéramos, las altas esferas con los objetivos que tienen las ciudades. Yo no sé, pero a mí me parece que es profundizando en la población los proyectos y los objetivos de las ciudades, yo creo. O sea, no sé, seguramente me equivoco, ¿eh?
Sí, yo creo que le han respondido en lo que es la cosa más inmediata de cómo utilizar lo que ya existe para apoyar lo que ustedes quieren conseguir. Pero creo que hay otro nivel que no es tan inmediato, pero en el que todos deberíamos trabajar, que es sobre todo en facilitar mucha información masivamente acerca de las soluciones basadas en la naturaleza, lo que Luke nos comentaba, Nature-Based Solutions, porque muchas veces convencemos a la gente de que acepten prospecciones petrolíferas, de que acepten infraestructuras, de que acepten cualquier tipo de desarrollo clásico, porque es la única solución. Y cuando hablamos de cambio climático, pues antes de venir aquí estaba hablando con una compañera de un delta que tenemos cercano aquí, el delta del Ebro, y de cómo, bueno, con las modificaciones del nivel del mar, y puede haber salinización, etcétera, vamos a empezar a tener una demanda masiva de infraestructuras en los años próximos. ¿Y en qué va a consistir? En lo que la gente ya conoce, diques, bueno, ingeniería clásica de cemento, cuando en realidad la naturaleza hace miles de millones de años que ha encontrado las soluciones para muchos de esos problemas. Simplemente tienes que darle el tiempo y favorecerla para que pueda realmente implantarse esa solución. Pero esto requiere un cambio de visión en mucha gente, desde los que viven en el territorio a los que toman las grandes decisiones. Yo recuerdo hace unos meses, cuando en esta iniciativa que les comentaba de conservación CAT, nos reunimos con todos los partidos políticos en Cataluña, en el Parlamento, y cuando hablamos del volumen de bienes y servicios que aportaban, del valor económico de esos bienes y servicios que aportaban a Cataluña, muchos de ellos pusieron una cara de sorpresa absoluta. Sorpresa porque las cifras son de una magnitud respecto al PIB realmente significativa, pero sorpresa porque lo desconocían. Entonces, creo que ahí hay un trabajo más lento, no va a resolver una decisión que tenemos que tomar este año, pero sí nos va a preparar para cambiar las decisiones a medio y largo plazo, y creo que es algo en lo que también sería bueno que fuéramos trabajando todos. Y creo que no tenemos más tiempo, no sé, los organizadores, creo que nos hemos comido ya todo el tiempo para esta mesa redonda, y well, I just want to say thank you to the three panelists. Thank you very much for the improvisation in some cases, but especially for the great quality of your contributions. Gracias a todos vosotros también por la atención, por el interés y por los comentarios. Y creo que, bueno, seguiremos trabajando juntos a nivel local, a nivel subnacional, a nivel nacional cuando nos dejen, y a nivel de ciudadanos, que es donde tenemos cada uno de nosotros nuestro compromiso. Gracias. Bona tarda a tots.
Thank you very much, all of you. We're going to keep Mr. Luc Bas with us because he's going to keep speaking to us. Moltes gràcies. Com dèiem, el director de l'Oficina Regional Europea, Unió Internacional, la seva xerrada serà sobre Unió Internacional per la Conservació de la Natura. D'aquí una estona, si ens arriba, perquè ja us hem explicat que tenim alguns problemes amb els avions, haurem de tenir també la Laure Ledoux, que és la subdirectora de la Unitat de Biodiversitat de la Direcció General de Medi Ambient de la Comissió Europea, que ens parlarà de les conclusions de la revisió intermèdia de l'Estratègia de Biodiversitat 2020 a la Unió. I d'aquí uns instants tindrem també amb nosaltres a Frederic Gagnon, que és entre nosaltres l'assessor climàtic de la Direcció General d'Organitzacions Internacionals i Francofonia del Govern del Quebec, que ens parlarà de la perspectiva provisional sobre la implementació regional dels objectius d'Aichi. Per tant, a qui li toca parlar ara és un cop més Luc Bas, el director de l'Oficina Regional Europea, amb aquest tema de la Unió Internacional per la Conservació de la Natura. Endavant, whenever you want.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todos. Yo hablo un poco español, yo no hablo catalán, perdónme, pero yo voy a continuar en inglés porque eso es mi idioma de trabajo. So I think I will not spoil your language any longer, neither Catalan or Spanish, and I will do this in English, so forgive me. I would have loved to do it in Spanish, but maybe no risks. Is this me?
Thank you for inviting IUCN. You need a translation, of course.
I'm on again? Okay, thank you. So I will have to keep on talking until the European Commission has arrived, I was told, so I can do that. I can do that if I need to. I think, and I feel like I owe you still a bit of an explanation of what IUCN actually is, and I will kind of do that in a combination of saying what our relationship with CBD is, what the history is, but even before that, I think I have to go a little bit further on explaining what it actually is. This union started in 1948, which sometimes we don't say it. It's the oldest, because the oldest, well, sometimes people think it's not very sexy to say you're the oldest. But it's the first international umbrella organization, and it was founded with state members and NGOs. And at that time, the NGOs, in all honesty, we had RSPB, I think the British, if there is any in the room. Are there any British in the room, actually? I can't resist to ask. No? That's a shame. But the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds existed, but mostly these were institutions, also government-related institutions, zoological institutions, the NGOs of 48. And so from the start, this has been a unique stakeholder platform with these two different big constituencies in there. Now today we have 90 state members, 120 government agencies from different levels, from the federal, national level, regional level, local level. And we have 1,000 NGO members. And these NGO members are also very diverse. We have, you could say, the dark green NGOs, if you like. We have the big environmental NGOs, which you know all well. We have hunters associations. We have landowner associations. So it's also the users part, or those that in fact use biodiversity, that are also members. So it's a richness. It's also a challenge, of course, to always find common ground there. But when we find it, these are kind of powerful messages. We have 6 commissions of experts, or where we group the experts, 6 different commissions. Puri is a member of one of them. I don't know by heart which it is. And she's a long track record with IUCN as well as an expert, and in many other, also with the National Committee in Spain, I believe. And even Vice President for Europe. So how could I forget that? I know I lost my thread there. Oh yes, the 6 commissions. So these group 15,000 experts that are all voluntarily contributing to the knowledge base and the knowledge products that IUCN produces. Because in the end, on the one side being a stakeholder organization, we of course produce, we believe, credible knowledge that decision makers can use. Often do, not always, unfortunately. And that's the history, for example, with the CBD. Not so many people know this, but actually the drafting of that started with a resolution at IUCN already in 1984 with the members' assembly there. And then, of course, in the run-up to 92, when a convention was agreed, but all the preparatory work kind of was pushed forward by IUCN. So there is a very close relationship between the CBD and IUCN. In many ways, there are targets where we are closer, some Aichi targets where we are a bit more and immediately relevant, but in the end, it's kind of course, a very important part for us and a very important partner for us to work with. We will be working very closely with the presidency, the Mexican presidency, in preparation, both in some of the stakeholder engagement with local governments. We will try to engage as much as we can in the run-up to. We will also complete a questionnaire with our members on their role, what have they been doing in achieving these Aichi targets. And of course, the civil society and youth forum at COP13, we will be very much corroborating on. That is a bit of a history and a bit of the current relationship with the CBD, because one of the challenges of IUCN is we launched something, you could argue, or we have been involved in launching something, and when it's there, we have to reinvent ourselves. Because before the CBD, IUCN was doing some of that work, and so it happens one after the other. The IPBS, for example, the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, is such another example, where we now have a formal role to organize a stakeholder engagement, but then again we have to
look and reinvent. Some of the things are core business, of course, like the red list of species. We are now working on red list of habitats. We're working on green list of protected areas. So as I said, we constantly reinvent ourselves. And I think one of the elements of reinvention, and what I very much support, is our collaboration with local and regional governments. I think this is something where IUCN really needs to strengthen its work. Do it in very close collaboration with existing networks, of course. We have to see and agree with those networks what the niche for IUCN is. We believe, and I will say it later, that these nature-based solutions and helping them, defining them, and trying to execute them is one of these elements where I think, and where we think, that IUCN can make a difference. Well, this is exactly and beautifully repeating what I just said. Now, 2016 is a year of opportunity if we want it to be a year of opportunity. We have the Paris Agreement, we have the SDGs agreed. These two in itself can create large political momentum. We have to really grab that momentum this year, because there are also already signs of this Paris Agreement. We see some slowing down of ratification, so let's keep on pushing it from a subnational government level. That's for Paris, although, as you know, in Paris, ecosystems and the role of ecosystems and the ecosystems approach have become much more central. So that's a very good move forward in the Paris Agreement. But in the SDGs, we can see a lot of integration. This, I think, was for IUCN one of the most positive outcomes of these SDGs, that in many of these SDGs you see references to the role of biodiversity, nature, ecosystems, much more than ever before. And therefore, I think these are more and very truly SDGs, which try to combine these different interests, and where nature now has an opportunity to point out, and those that are advocating for nature can point to the SDGs. Look, in the SDGs it is referenced. We all know this is soft law. There is no mechanism, there's no compliance mechanism to these SDGs. This is more a moral obligation. And so it's something that we will, and I hope this network as well, will put decision makers to their responsibility in executing and in achieving those targets. If you compare these targets, the Aichi targets and the SDGs, and when you make the linkage, one of the biggest challenges, I think, is the fact that these are 2020 targets. You will recognize that many of the SDG targets, the sub-targets, are actually not 2030 targets. So some parts of the SDG are in Agenda 2020 still, potentially given the fact that it had to be aligned. So I think what is now the big question, and where I see little debate so far, maybe some people that are in the internal circuits of the CBD see it, but I don't see that 2030 debate really happening. So what will these Aichi targets, or what will these new targets look like for 2030? I think that's a very urgent thing to do. I was hoping that Braulio would have mentioned something in that direction, that this debate will start. COP13 would be the best time to start doing it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not so much of a CBD expert, I must admit, but I haven't seen any concrete agenda for that COP13 to discuss 2030 targets for biodiversity, which I think is really necessary. One of the important roles for IUCN, just to talk about it more specifically, is that as we do so much knowledge gathering, as we are so much involved in these different indicators, and some of these indicators are directly a direct input to the reports, to CBD, and then ultimately it could be direct into SDGs. We are part of this intergovernmental agency, of this panel, because we have a UN observer seat. IUCN has a UN observer seat at the General Assembly, and therefore we are also part of that exercise that will define these SDG indicators. And of course you can imagine that we will do everything we can to make sure that these are balanced, and that ultimately it also takes into account these different levels of indicators, because you will have how you will measure and how you will look at these indicators will also depend on what level vertically you will look at it. And again, there the local governments come in play. This was just to visualize it, and we can share this slide. This is not perfect yet. I mean, this can be much more elaborative, but I think this exercise in itself to compare the different targets is an interesting one. some of the comments I made you can already recognize, so the difference in time horizon. In many ways you see that there is very much of a consistency. I think some of the integration could have even been better because some SDGs do not make a reference to the fact that in the end the ecosystems are the foundation for all we do and everything we do. But it's definitely a step forward. IUCN has been working in the whole process up to the agreement of the Agenda 2030 to do this with many partners, and I think we've been at least partially successful. No surprise that the draft global IUCN program that is to be agreed at the Congress in September, which I hope some of you can attend. It's a long way, yes. The best bid came from Hawaii. As you know, this is a process in which different cities or governments can bid to host it, and it is in Hawaii, so it's good for the Pacific Rim, it's good for Asia, good for the Americas still. For Europe, it's a bit of a tough one, but I've seen already many being registered, so I hope you'll all make it. That program will be agreed then, and we nicely let it coincide with the 2020 horizon. Well, this is not on purpose, it's just happened to be. This is the next 4-year program of IUCN. I could go in detail again, I don't want to do this, although I know that I have to continue until the European Commission arrives. But the whole program is and has been based on the previous one, in which we had 3 big pillars, one on specific conservation, one on governance, and one on solutions. Those 3 pillars remain. They've always been kind of constructed around the Aichi targets, which of course make a lot of sense. And now the new program that is on the table to be agreed in, at the Congress is very much also making sure that it is aligned with the SDGs. And for us, the SDGs are the direction for the next 4 years, let there be no doubt. And then, of course, the part of my intervention where you've all been waiting for is, so what do we want to do, what will we do, what can we do with our local and subnational government partners? Unfortunately, I have to admit that I cannot say that there are so many members. We did an analysis of the membership at the subnational or the local level, so we all grouped it. There are not so many that are members yet, if you compare to how many there are. I think there is about 30, 35 globally that are members, and it's very specific in relation to which part of the world. So in Australia there are many. I think almost all of the states in Australia are a member. Spain is also very prominently present. And then you have the French regions where you see interesting involvement where they were affiliate members. And the French regions are very active with IUCN, with the French National Committee. But they are only now affiliate members. And I think that is an interesting debate also with the French government on how can we make sure that these regional governments actually are government members, be it subnational government members as an agency. But now they're mostly affiliate. There's one exemption, and maybe they can lead the way to make this more solid for France as well. This is the region of La Réunion. The Department of La Réunion, the Environment Department, is a member. That said, membership currently is only for the agencies, so it's not a government as such, a local or a subnational government that is a member. There's a long history of trying to get this on the table. There is the leadership, again, from some regions that I've seen with the motion that is being proposed. There was originally also a motion from the Council of IUCN to get more recognition and a clear role and a full membership. Of course, this all comes with the complexity of the voting system and so on and so forth. But ultimately, I'm from the Secretariat, so I have no formal position on this. I can only say that I think there has to be a clearer and a more active and a more institutional role for that level of government at IUCN. This collaboration has been mentioned in resolutions. We are a bit of an institutional, complex organization as well, so we have a process in which we present the motions. Those that know the organization, they are already kind of in an electronic discussion on these motions, and these motions ultimately become resolutions and they're voted at the Congress. And at the Congress, it is a vote in the government chamber and in the NGO chamber. This means, and this is again unique in the world, that the NGOs cannot then oppose anything on the governments, but neither the other way. So you need a majority in those two chambers. And at some point in 2012, there was this resolution on this closer collaboration with local governments and regional and subnational governments. A very specific project that I've very quickly alluded to is one that comes from another resolution of IUCN. It's called World Environment Hubs. It was the Korean government, and more precisely the Jeju province, that wanted to applaud, wanted to certify leadership in environmental matters, in environmental performance at that subnational level, at the provincial level, or as I said before, the one level down from the national. And thanks to their generous support, we have been starting this World Environment Hubs project, which ultimately has converged into looking at which of these governments excel, which of these governments want to share their experience on implementing these nature-based solutions. And for those that doubt what it is, it's quite simple. You just, for example, you restore a landscape, which is a big project of IUCN as well. It's forest landscape restoration just to protect your watersheds. There is a lot of flood risk that can be prevented with a nature-based solution. I think you're very much experienced to know what is meant by that. But they're not being chosen, these solutions. As Puri also said in our panel, it's often other choices are being made, and therefore we need the good arguments, the good tools, the assessments, and the evaluation, the validation of those services and ecosystem services to make those nature-based solutions work. Interesting on these nature-based solutions is that they are always no-regret measures. I mean, for example, on adaptation. If you want to adapt to climate change, you can build concrete dikes, for example, if you're afraid of rising sea levels. But you're not 100% sure how much it's going to rise. Honestly, there is a lot of uncertainty. The only certain thing we know is that climate change is happening, that temperature is rising, and that there are some models of what it actually will mean. But if you go into a nature-based solutions, you have all the other benefits. Apart from the carbon sequestration and the potential for adaptation, you have all the other benefits on health, on name it. So these are no-regret measures. You don't have to wait for scientific certainty, which is often used, unfortunately, as an excuse not to act. Because, yeah, we don't know. Well, a nature-based solution you can do, and you will always have your benefits. And this is what we want to applaud, we want to push, we want those governments to share, and therefore we have this global platform with a steering committee that has met in Paris and will meet again in Hawaii. And as I said before, we have translated this to the European level as well, so we want to push it also at the European level with a platform on nature-based solutions very specifically. And here, I need to add, and it's a shame that Wales isn't here, because I know Wales has been working very hard on this MOU on nature-based solutions. I think it's literally called also nature-based solutions or natural solutions. I'm not 100% sure what the exact wording is, but it's clear that I want to collect some of those members from Energy Forestry, from ICLE, from NCOR, from these different networks that exist, to push in such an MOU their politicians and with their politicians for this to happen much more. I mentioned the French National Committee, and I think my colleague from the French National Committee was going to be here. I'm not sure whether she has arrived. Oh, there. Valérie, but I forgot your surname. I'm sorry. So, Moral. Okay, Valérie Moral, she's leading the, that's what they call in French, le territoire, the territorial approach with the regions, many of the regions member of IUCN. I won't go so much in detail. I think it might be interesting if at the time during the conference in a comment you might explain a little bit more if you're comfortable to give a bit more detail about what's going on there. But there's a lot of really good stuff happening on governance, on coordination among those French regions. So France, in this case, within IUCN and with the National Committee, is definitely having a leading role. And we hope to see it happen in also in other countries. So lessons also to be learned from the French National Committee. And this is where I want to end, apparently, because I've been told that the European Commission has arrived, or am I wrong? She has not arrived. Okay, fine. Should I take any questions now, or should we do it later? Yeah, I'm open for any questions.
please shoot.
Thank you, Luc, for 2 times presentations, and we learned a lot about what IUCN is going to do. My name is Aichi. I'm from ECNC, European Center for Nature Conservation, and I just wanted to know that this World Congress that you refer to, is there any specific occasion, or is there any specific meeting for regional governments or the regions? Is there any kind of contribution specifically to that, or is it one of the other events that is included? So just maybe it is also helpful for people to reorient themselves to the sessions.
Yeah, there's 2 very concrete events that my office is involved in, which is the meeting of the experts for this World Environment Hubs project. So these are not necessarily people that are in the governments, but are experts on the matter, and try to guide with the scientific input for this Nature-Based Solutions Network or the World Environment Hubs. And there will be a steering committee of decision makers. And as you ask, it's a bit of an open invitation, because given the distance, the 10 governments that are now currently or came together in Paris and agreed to support this initiative, together with some of the international organizations, by the way. It's not only the regional governments. Quite a few, unfortunately, cannot make it to Hawaii. And so we see some geographical gaps occur. One, for example, is Mexico. I don't know whether you have any, I think a Mexican representative from the network, I think, the ANAE. No? Is he here? Well, anyway, is he coming still? They're not. Oh, that's a shame. Anyway. Okay, so where is Jalisco? No? Anyway, there's a few. If you want to talk about participating in that meeting, it's not an open meeting, because it has to discuss the way forward of this initiative. But if there is interest from others at the decision-making level, that's important to join, and then let us know. And those, of course, that already participate in Hawaii, because I can imagine you may not just jump into your airplane and go to Hawaii in the next 2 months. Yes, so that's the meetings. I have to tell you that during the forum, the 5 first days of the event, which is not the actual Congress, the Members' Assembly is the last 4 days. The first 5 days are a forum with over 1,000 events. So it might be worth, if those subnational governments that are looking into or already decided to participate, to see whether anything is going on. Maybe some of them have even applied for an event that we haven't seen yet. So, but yeah, it could be a bit more central. And we are pushing a little bit the panelists in the high-level debates to actually make references to local and subnational government. Well.
Merci. Merci Luc. C'est Mamoudou Touré, donc je viens du conseil départemental de Gossas, Sénégal. Donc j'avais une question donc, pour l'IUCN, parce qu'il y a un démembrement de l'IUCN qui est à Dakar et qui travaille depuis plusieurs années dans nos collectivités territoriales. Donc on a essayé d'aller les rencontrer donc, pour une ouverture vers les collectivités territoriales, donc vers ces gouvernements infranationaux. Et la réponse, c'est ce que vous avez dit, que la collaboration se fait de façon bilatérale entre l'État et donc l'IUCN. Maintenant, la question, c'est de savoir, est-ce qu'il est possible qu'on puisse porter un plaidoyer vers l'IUCN pour qu'il puisse s'ouvrir donc, aux collectivités territoriales? Merci.
Pour? J'ai pas entendu, en fait. Je comprends, mais
je n'ai pas entendu. Un plaidoyer donc pour que l'IUCN puisse s'ouvrir aux collectivités territoriales dans nos types de pays, parce qu'ils continuent toujours à travailler avec le niveau central.
Oui, maintenant les motions sont sur la table, alors il y a déjà des... Maybe I should go back to English, because not everyone... So, yes, there are some things on the table already. I think Saint Louis province is in Senegal, is it?
Yeah, so we will have Saint Louis also in that meeting that I mentioned before. So we have a Senegalese African representation. And it's good to hear that you already work with IUCN. So, but if you have a call to make, I think it's up to the governments, and we are very perceptive. Huh? Yeah. Puri.
Thank you. I just wanted to give some more information regarding the process in IUCN for accepting the subnational and the local governance at the statutory level of having the right of vote. Because I was involved with 8 years at the Task Force on Governance at the Council, and we work a lot to try to develop a proposal, and this proposal was put to the consideration here in Barcelona in 2008 when Barcelona hosted the World Conservation Congress, the same as Hawaii was happening here. And the main problem is always the state vote, the vote of the states, that they don't want to open the space for other levels of public administrations taking decisions internationally. And it's really a pity. We try again in Jeju, in the last Congress, and again, the same problem. But I will say that even if you, as representatives of subnational governments or local governments, you don't have a vote, it's always useful to attend the IUCN Congress. It's very useful because things not only happen with the big decisions, things happen when you are able to establish connections and networking, and this is what is the Congress about. It's about networking, about discussion, about meeting with other people, preparing projects, visualizing future activities you can do. So if you are really interested in biodiversity going to the ground, I think that even if you don't have an official vote, it's always useful. And it's a way to reinforce the argument, the rationale, to be in the future a structural part of IUCN.
Yeah. I think I want to echo that. So you may not have a direct vote in IUCN yet, but you definitely have a voice. And your voice will be better heard if there's more of you. Because as I said before, there is only quite a few subnational or local agencies that are a member. About 30, honestly, that disappears in the sum of everything. That said, you do have a vote, but only indirectly, through your state member, but it is up to the state member to organize the vote as they want. Often it's the state that keeps one, then it gives one to the national agencies, and then one to government agencies. There are different models, but ultimately, it's true, it's the state that decides how these 3 votes of a state member are being shared.
Without the involvement of the government of Catalonia, we will never have this Congress here.
But that is a nice example, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to say something, Puri, related to what you said. Is that from the government of Catalonia, we have proposed an amendment to the statutes of IUCN, going back to what was proposed 4 years ago, which is that the membership, that states have 4 votes instead of 3, and regarding the possibility that one of them can be for subnational and local authorities. So this is now on the air, it's in the portal of the IUCN. We got the support of 4 other subnational governments, so that this proposal of amendment will be discussed at the General Assembly, which is, we think, it's actually not a new. I mean, it isn't something new because it's what was proposed. But the thing is that we almost got the majority of votes in both voting forums. Sorry, and this is why we are trying to push it forward again this time. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to this, this is where IUCN becomes this international organization where, as in all organizations that have to make the decisions, you have to inform the decision makers, not to say to lobby them. So inform the decision makers, make sure that your networks are all mobilized, and
yeah, and then try to seek a majority for your motion. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. We had you twice here today. I ara, per acabar la jornada d'avui, tindrem a Frederic Gagnon. Com dèiem, és l'assessor climàtic de la Direcció General d'Organitzacions Internacionals i Francofonia del Govern de Quebec i parlarà de la perspectiva provisional sobre la implementació regional dels objectius d'Aichi. S'il vous plaît, Frederic Gagnon. Merci.
Hola, bonjour, bon dia. Distingués invités, chers collègues, mesdames et messieurs, j'aimerais tout d'abord remercier la Catalogne, un de nos partenaires essentiels, un partenaire du Québec, tant en matière de lutte contre les changements climatiques qu'en protection de la diversité biologique, pour l'organisation de cette conférence. Je tiens aussi à souligner le rôle de l'équipe des énergies 4SD dans celle-ci. Je suis honoré d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui afin d'échanger sur la contribution des gouvernements régionaux et des États fédérés à l'atteinte des objectifs d'Aichi, alors que se profile à l'horizon, alors là je vais répéter un peu, la tenue de la 13e conférence des parties, et comme vous le savez tous maintenant, en décembre prochain, une conférence biennale à la différence de celle sur les changements climatiques, donc qui a lieu seulement aux 2 ans, donc c'est habituellement une période assez fébrile, les 6 mois avant. C'est l'occasion pour nos gouvernements de débattre sur des positions communes et en vue de faire des recommandations. Je suis convaincu que la richesse des interventions lors de la conférence et les échanges constructifs que nous pourrons y tenir nous permettront de développer des conclusions que nous pourrons présenter en décembre prochain afin de mettre en valeur nos actions, de renforcer la présence et la reconnaissance du rôle des gouvernements des États fédérés et des régions lors de la COP 13 et au-delà. Depuis de nombreuses années, la prise en compte de la biodiversité s'est intégrée à nos politiques publiques. Nous avons pris conscience des liens inextricables qui existent entre sa préservation et d'autres enjeux environnementaux, tels que la lutte contre les changements climatiques et la désertification. Le Québec s'assure depuis plus de 20 ans d'agir activement en matière de conservation et d'utilisation durable de la diversité biologique et a participé à la mise en œuvre de la Convention. En se déclarant lié par décret dès 1992, le Québec s'engageait dès lors à adhérer aux principes et aux objectifs de la Convention. Depuis, de nombreuses actions ont été prises, dont notamment l'adoption de 2 stratégies et plans d'action, ainsi que des orientations gouvernementales en 2013. Les différentes mesures seront notamment abordées par ma collègue demain lors du panel de l'après-midi. Nous nous réjouissons aussi du fait que parmi les nombreux accords multilatéraux en matière d'environnement, la Convention sur la diversité biologique est probablement celle qui donne la place la plus importante à la reconnaissance du rôle des États fédérés et des régions, qui s'est reflétée notamment, et M. Diaz l'a souligné, par l'adoption de décisions dès 2008, et ce, lors des 3 réunions subséquentes. Cette reconnaissance est également traduite par la création du comité consultatif des gouvernements infranationaux sur la diversité biologique, une des pièces maîtresses du Global Partnership for Local and Subnational Action for Biodiversity. En adhérant au comité en 2012, le Québec s'est engagé à contribuer à la mise en œuvre du plan d'action des gouvernements infranationaux, des villes et autres autorités locales, adopté à Nagoya en 2010. Concrètement, le Québec y contribue par l'adoption et la mise en œuvre de diverses mesures législatives, politiques et administratives. Également, je tiens à souligner que l'implication du Québec, eu égard au déploiement de la Convention, repose aussi sur l'accueil du secrétariat de la Convention, et ce depuis 2006, et nous avons, depuis 1996, et nous avons donc célébré le 20e anniversaire de son accueil à Montréal le 2 mai dernier, lors de la première réunion de l'organe en charge de l'application de la Convention. Nous avons d'ailleurs annoncé à cette occasion le renouvellement de la subvention du gouvernement du Québec, et ce pour la période 2015-2016 à 2019-2020, qui permet de contribuer au financement des locaux du secrétariat. L'essentiel de mon allocution d'aujourd'hui vise toutefois à présenter le travail qui a été réalisé par différents États fédérés et régions afin de répondre aux objectifs d'Aichi. Depuis de nombreuses années, plusieurs de nos gouvernements sont effectivement mobilisés afin de mettre en œuvre, selon leurs compétences, des actions liées au plan stratégique de la Convention. En ce sens, lors de l'entérinement du plan d'action 2013-2015 du comité consultatif, ici même à Barcelone, ses membres ont constaté qu'il serait nécessaire d'obtenir un portrait plus clair de ce qui est alors connu et répertorié au sujet de nos actions. C'est donc pourquoi, dans le cadre de ce plan, le Québec a accepté de piloter le développement d'outils permettant d'aider les gouvernements infranationaux à intégrer les objectifs d'Aichi dans leur politique et stratégie. Lors de la mise en œuvre du projet intitulé Integrated and Aligned Biodiversity Planning, un état des lieux a dans un premier temps été effectué auprès de membres du comité consultatif ainsi que de membres du réseau Énergie 4SD en vue de répertorier différentes études de cas. Il apparaissait particulièrement important de réaliser une telle étude comparative. Le partage de connaissances tant sur les succès que les défis rencontrés, les possibilités d'échange de nos expertises réciproques, le fait de pouvoir comparer des points précis de nos stratégies et mesures sont des moteurs essentiels à l'amélioration de nos politiques en matière de diversité biologique, tout particulièrement si l'on souhaite se fixer des objectifs dont le niveau d'ambition et la portée sont comparables à ceux des objectifs d'Aichi. Ce même souci, ou plutôt intérêt vers le partage d'expériences, s'est d'ailleurs exprimé lors de la première réunion de l'OSCA de mai dernier. En effet, l'organe note dans ses recommandations que l'examen efficace des progrès réalisés dans la mise en œuvre du plan stratégique 2011-2020 dépend justement de la prompte communication d'informations par les parties, de l'intégration de la biodiversité en tant qu'instrument de politique générale et des rapports entre la Convention et les objectifs de développement durable ou bien de l'accord de Paris sur les changements climatiques. Ces éléments sont donc au cœur des préoccupations en matière de collaboration entre les parties et également l'organe soulignait dans ses recommandations l'importance de la participation des pouvoirs publics à tous les niveaux et de la mobilisation de l'ensemble des acteurs concernés. De manière plus précise, les objectifs visés par la réalisation de cet état des lieux étaient de mettre l'accent sur les différents niveaux de gouvernance et les planifications territoriales assumées par les gouvernements infranationaux, de mettre en évidence, lorsqu'elles existent, les opportunités de collaboration ou de complémentarité entre les niveaux nationaux et infranationaux en matière de conservation, de mettre en valeur la contribution de nos gouvernements en matière de conservation de la biodiversité et des services écologiques, et de prendre conscience des défis et des enjeux rencontrés par nos gouvernements dans l'intégration des objectifs d'Aichi. Pour ce faire, nous avons élaboré, en collaboration avec la préfecture d'Aichi ainsi que le secrétariat de la Convention, un questionnaire qui visait à obtenir des renseignements plus précis sur les actions infranationales mises en place par nos partenaires. Nous avons donc transmis ce questionnaire à différents membres du réseau, différents membres du comité consultatif, et je tiens à remercier ceux qui ont répondu à ce questionnaire. On retrouvait dans celui-ci des questions qui portaient sur un bref portrait de la biodiversité sur le territoire des gouvernements infranationaux, que ce soit un portrait des différents écosystèmes, une énumération des espèces fauniques et floristiques, des renseignements sur la politique nationale en matière de biodiversité, donc le système de partage et de répartition des compétences, une description de la stratégie nationale si elle existait, et bien évidemment, un état de situation quant aux politiques internes adoptées par le répondant, l'existence d'une stratégie ou d'un autre type de plan d'action permettant l'atteinte des objectifs d'Aichi, les exemples de mesures particulières qui visent à répondre à ces objectifs, un relevé des actions concrètes qui avaient été déjà mises en œuvre, également l'influence potentielle de la stratégie nationale qui, comme dans les conclusions que je pourrais présenter, vous le verrez, peut avoir des répercussions, et évidemment les défis rencontrés dans la mise en œuvre de cette stratégie ou de ce plan d'action. Au final, nous avons 10 gouvernements, soit la préfecture d'Aichi, l'État de Campeche, la Catalogne, la région de Fatick, la province de Guangdong, l'État de Goiás, le Pays basque, la région Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, la Wallonie et bien sûr le Québec, qui font partie de l'étude de cas qui sera publié officiellement et distribué lors du sommet sur les gouvernements infranationaux qui se déroulera dans le cadre de la 13e conférence des parties. Je tiens à souligner qu'il s'agit évidemment d'un échantillon somme toute limité. Il y a de nombreux autres gouvernements infranationaux, certains sont ici et certains collaborent avec nous dans le cadre de d'autres plateformes qui ont également des politiques établies en matière de diversité biologique et que ces pratiques peuvent être fort différentes dans leur formulation. Donc la publication n'est pas nécessairement représentative de tous les cas de figure, mais elle permet de dégager certaines tendances et constats généraux. Donc en attendant la diffusion à Cancun en décembre prochain, il y a quelques éléments quand même que je veux vous partager. Tout d'abord, l'analyse des questionnaires montre que plus de la moitié des 10 gouvernements qui font partie de l'étude ont mis en place une stratégie en matière de diversité biologique ou sont en voie de le faire. Les autres gouvernements, même s'ils ne sont pas dotés de stratégie au sens de la Convention, ont développé des politiques qui répondent en partie aux objectifs d'Aichi. D'ailleurs, 9 gouvernements sur 10 ont révisé leur stratégie ou politique en matière de diversité biologique à la suite de l'adoption des objectifs d'Aichi afin de les rendre propres au nouveau contexte. Une première conclusion, c'est donc rapidement présenter l'intégration des objectifs d'Aichi dans les politiques des gouvernements infranationaux est concrètement amorcée. Pour ce qui est de la mise en œuvre maintenant, c'est surtout ce qui était intéressant et qui était le but de l'étude de cas et d'en faire un document qui pourrait permettre de renforcer la pratique de d'autres gouvernements, c'est que pour plus de la moitié des répondants, il y a certains types d'actions qui sont extrêmement structurés et efficaces. Il y a même très peu d'objectifs d'Aichi qui ne sont pas couverts par au moins un gouvernement infranational. Et dans le cas de certains objectifs qui sont difficilement mis en œuvre, c'est souvent que ça relève plutôt de la compétence de l'État central. Il y a quand même les 2/3 des gouvernements dans leur réponse au questionnaire qui ont fait état de difficultés à mettre en œuvre les objectifs de conservation. La plupart des objectifs, tout d'abord soulevés, sont souvent similaires à ceux rencontrés par les parties à la Convention, soit un manque de ressources humaines et financières pour coordonner les actions, un manque de conscientisation et de sensibilisation de la société civile, des entreprises et même des décideurs, des difficultés de coordination entre les différents niveaux gouvernementaux ainsi qu'avec les acteurs de la société civile, ainsi qu'un développement économique parfois privilégié aux dépens de la diversité biologique. Il faut aussi souligner que certains facteurs sont toutefois propres à la mise en œuvre au niveau infranational. Par exemple, des leviers d'action variés et parfois limités selon les compétences et les pouvoirs de ces États fédérés ou de ces régions, ainsi que l'influence des changements des priorités au niveau national qui peuvent avoir des répercussions sur la mise en œuvre au niveau infranational. Le deuxième constat est que les gouvernements infranationaux ont eux aussi besoin d'un accompagnement accru afin de pouvoir développer des outils adaptables à leur contexte politique et économique. Et c'est là que les instances telles que le comité consultatif des gouvernements infranationaux peut jouer un rôle important, notamment en favorisant les échanges et la coopération entre ses membres. D'ailleurs, fort de ce bilan, il y a lieu de continuer à se pencher sur l'analyse de pistes d'action communes pour renforcer la mise en œuvre des objectifs d'Aichi dans nos gouvernements. Cet exercice doit toutefois se faire en tenant compte du fait que nos compétences peuvent varier considérablement. En ce sens, je tiens à souligner que ces actions visant l'expertise, l'échange d'expertise pourront particulièrement passer par le projet de plateforme et d'apprentissage décentralisé sur la biodiversité qui a été présenté par Natalia plus tôt. Sous l'impulsion d'Énergie 4SD, avec différents partenaires, différents États fédérés et régions, dont le Québec, ainsi que le secrétariat, un projet pilote a été lancé et a été soumis à l'initiative BioBridge, inaugurée par la République de Corée, et qui vise à renforcer la coopération technique et scientifique. Le Québec espère collaborer efficacement au développement de la plateforme, notamment en fournissant des informations sur notre expérience. En conclusion, je tiens à profiter de cette tribune pour inviter les gouvernements infranationaux présents et ceux surtout intéressés à se joindre aux travaux du comité, à soutenir la mise en place de la plateforme de coopération décentralisée et enfin à participer nombreux à la 13e conférence des parties afin de pouvoir valoriser l'importance du rôle des États fédérés et des régions dans la conservation et l'utilisation durable de la diversité biologique. En dépit des avancées réalisées par la Convention, les défis que doit relever la communauté internationale pour préserver la diversité biologique demandent des efforts additionnels urgents, aussi bien qu'une forte coopération internationale. Nous devons donc redoubler d'ardeur dans la mise en œuvre du plan stratégique 2011-2020 pour la diversité biologique, et ce principalement dans nos gouvernements respectifs. Le Québec entend pour sa part poursuivre sa participation dans cet effort collectif, comme il le fait depuis de nombreuses années. Je vous remercie de votre attention et je vous souhaite une excellente conférence.
Now I'll introduce her.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gagnon. And now, remember we were saying that planes were running a bit late, but we have the person we were waiting for. Els avions a vegades van tard, a vegades les coses van a poc, però acaben passant. Ja tenim entre nosaltres la Laure Ledoux, la sotsdirectora de la Unitat de Biodiversitat, de la Direcció General de Medi Ambient de la Comissió Europea. Ella ens parlarà de les conclusions de la revisió intermèdia de l'Estratègia de Biodiversitat 2020 a la Unió. Please, come to the stage.
Bon après-midi, buenas tardes. I'm going to speak in English, actually, because my presentation is in English. And I really apologize for having delayed this session. Just to make it clear, I was at 7 at the airport this morning, so it wasn't completely independent of my influence. So I will present to you the midterm review of the EU Biodiversity Strategy to 2020. Let's see. First, by making clear that the EU Biodiversity Strategy translates the Global Strategic Plan and the global Aichi targets into the targets and actions that are relevant at EU level. And it recognizes the role of actors at all levels. So it's basically relying also on actors at subnational, regional and local level to actually implement the EU framework. And it's relevant for all the EU targets, the targets of the EU Biodiversity Strategy, whether we're talking about implementing nature legislation, stepping up implementation for protected areas, whether we're talking about Target 2, which is more about protecting biodiversity in the wider landscape, restoration and green infrastructure, whether we're talking about the main pressures on biodiversity, the sectoral pressures, whether we're talking about agriculture, forest, and fisheries, and making them sustainable, invasive and in species, that's Target 5, or the global level, the EU contribution to protecting global biodiversity. So all these targets are relevant for the different actors that I mentioned. So the headline targets of the EU Biodiversity Strategy, which were endorsed by all heads of states and governments within the EU, is to halt the loss of biodiversity and the degradation of ecosystem services in the EU by 2020, and to restore them as far as possible, and to contribute to averting global biodiversity loss. So the strategy was adopted in 2011, and the midterm review was adopted at the end of last year. And the main conclusion is not very positive, and it basically translates also the same conclusions that are going on at global level. And it's basically that there is continuing biodiversity loss and degradation of ecosystem services in the EU and globally. And what's important to stress is that this has consequences, of course, not only for species and habitats, but it has serious implications for the capacity of biodiversity to meet human needs in the future. What's also important to stress is that it's not all doom and gloom. So there have been local improvements as a result of action on the ground. Again, recognizing that all actors have had a role, including local and subnational level actors. So this is promising in terms of stepping up action for towards 2020, but it's very clear that these actions need to be scaled up to have a measurable impact on the overall negative trends, and this is not yet the case. So a few words about Target 1, which, as I said, focuses on nature legislation and fully implementing the Birds and the Habitats Directive in the EU. So here, again, it's clear there has been progress in carrying out actions. The Natura 2000 network is almost complete on land, but it still needs to be expanded at sea. There are more species and habitats in secure or favorable or improved status compared to the last nature report, but many others remain in unfavorable status, and some of them are deteriorating further. So clearly we're not there yet, and there's still a number of challenges to meet this target by 2020. First, the completion of the Marine Natura 2000 network, but more generally, more effective management and increased finance to support Natura 2000. Here we go. On Target 2, on maintaining and restoring ecosystems and the services, there has been progress on setting up policy frameworks. So within the EU, we adopted the Green Infrastructure Strategy in 2013. There's been quite a lot of progress in terms of knowledge improvement, in particular with the MASS initiative, Mapping and Assessing Ecosystems and the Services, which has strong momentum at the moment, and all EU member states are engaged, of course, at different levels in terms of mapping and assessing ecosystems and the services, but all member states are engaged. There are some restoration activities, often driven by legal requirements under the nature directives, under the water framework directives, and the marine strategic framework directive. But it's also clear that the degradation of ecosystems and the services continues. So some ecosystem services have improved, in particular provisioning services like timber production, but others are declining, and that's often regulatory services, and the recent reports from the Joint Research Center has shown that in particular pollination, as an example, is declining. So the challenges up to 2020 are to develop and implement national and regional frameworks to promote restoration and green infrastructure, and to ensure no net loss of ordinary biodiversity outside Natura 2000. Target 3 is about increasing the contribution of agriculture to maintaining and enhancing biodiversity. Here again, there's a continuing decline in the status of species and habitats of EU interests and associated with agriculture, and this is based on a number of indicators. So on data reported under the Birds and the Habitats Directive, on habitats linked with agriculture, but also on the Farmland Birds Index or butterflies, grassland butterflies. So all these indicators are showing the same decline. It's true that with the new Common Agricultural Policy from 2014 to 2020, there's a range of instruments to support biodiversity that are available to member states, but there's also a lot of flexibility and choice left to member states in choosing these measures. So they need to be taken up on a sufficient scale to have an impact in the future. And there are many examples of sustainable agriculture practices that can be replicated and implemented more broadly to put the EU back on track to achieve the target by 2020. And you can see that the arrows at the top I haven't mentioned for all the targets, but this is one of the few targets where it's red, and it's showing that there needs to be much further progress to achieve the targets. The other part of Target 3 is on the contribution of forestry to maintaining and enhancing biodiversity. So the EU forest area has increased in terms of quantity. The area of forest has increased, but there's no sign of improvements in the conservation status of habitats and species of EU importance. So in terms of quality, there's still a problem. There's more generally a problem of availability of data on the status of forest habitats outside Natura 2000. And also a general conclusion there is that the potential of forest management plans for achieving the target remains largely unused. Target 4 is about ensuring the sustainable use of fisheries resources and achieving good environmental status under the Marine Strategic Framework Directive. There again, there has been progress in setting up the policy framework with the reformed common fisheries policies and the Marine Strategic Framework Directive. We're also looking at setting up better ocean governance for more sustainable management of marine resources. This is something we're working together between DG Environment and DG Mare. Overall, again, the conclusion is that there's been uneven policy implementation and that major challenges remain. So just over 50% of stocks that are assessed in terms of maximum sustainable yields show sustainability in 2013. And there are still multiple pressures and continued decline of marine species and ecosystems across Europe's seas overall. Target 5 is about helping to combat invasive alien species. This is clearly one of the fastest growing threats to biodiversity. In the EU, there's been a regulation in force since 2015. You can see that there the target has been evaluated in green, and that's because in terms of timeline, of course it doesn't mean we've reached the overall target yet, but in terms of timeline and the actions that were foreseen, we're roughly on track. In particular, if we consider that the first list of invasive alien species is going to be adopted soon, there's been a positive vote in the committee already at the end of last year. But there's still a lot to be done to actually achieve the target overall in terms of implementing the next steps of the regulation, and also very important, the ratification of the Ballast Water Management Convention is crucial for addressing marine invasive alien species. The final target about the EU contribution, stepping up the EU contribution to averting global biodiversity loss. The EU and the member states altogether remain the largest donors for biodiversity globally. There have been a number of policy framework developments regarding CITES and access and benefit sharing in particular. There have been steps to reduce indirect drivers of global biodiversity loss, in particular regarding the adoption of a wildlife trafficking action plan. But overall, there's insufficient progress in reducing the impacts of EU consumption patterns on global biodiversity, and on the current trajectory, it's clear that existing efforts will not be sufficient to meet the targets globally. A few words on financing. The overall aim is to mainstream biodiversity throughout the EU budgets, through all the main EU instruments, whether this is the instruments related to agriculture policy or fisheries policy or regional policy. And if I might say a few words in particular on urban biodiversity, because with the adoption of the Pact of Amsterdam recently, there's been a renewed momentum on this, and I wanted to flag that the regional, the cohesion financing instruments, in particular through the European Regional Development Programme, now provide quite a number of options for urban integrated development, and that can cover nature-based solutions and other ecosystem-related work. There's a target of using at least 5% of these funds for urban regional development, so that's quite a number of opportunities. Horizon 2020 is also funding targeting nature-based solutions in particular, with at the moment a call for large-scale demonstration projects. LIFE remains the main instrument for environment and for nature and biodiversity in particular. But it's worth mentioning that there's a new pilot under LIFE which is looking at new ways of financing natural capital related projects, and that's demonstrating that some of the projects can be good for biodiversity and natural capital, but also provide revenues. And the idea is to attract more investments from the private sector, but also from the public sector, so there are opportunities for public-private partnerships, including, for example, local authorities, and it can fund projects related to green infrastructure or payment for ecosystem services, to give a few examples. Worth mentioning also is that there are two particular environment-related issues where there's a specific tracking mechanism in the EU budget, and that's climate, but also biodiversity. So we have set up a specific process to require all Commission services to report every year how much they spend on biodiversity, and that's important to report to the Convention on Biological Diversity, amongst others. And I mentioned already that the EU external instruments are very important to contribute to the global target. Partnerships are very important, in particular for multi-governance processes. So within the nature directives, there's a biogeographical process involving the main actors that is in place. That's important to help implement these directives in the EU. There's also a specific scheme that has been set up to raise awareness of the benefits from the Natura 2000 network. We have also renewed or launched a new phase of the EU Business and Biodiversity Platform, which links with national and local platforms, but also with the global platform that has been set up under the CBD. And also, sorry, I'm just also worth mentioning TEEB and synergies with other conventions, TEEB being the economics and the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, to which the EU contributes financially and in the coordination group. So that's me going a little bit too quickly. In terms of knowledge, the reporting under the different relevant directives, and in particular the nature directives, has been streamlined, and at the moment we're working on improving synergies with other directives which are related to ecosystems, including the Water Framework Directives and the Marine Strategic Framework Directive. I already mentioned MASS, and now we're looking into the second phase of MASS, where we're in particular focusing on looking beyond biophysical assessment and looking also at a range of different types of values and integrating these into accounting systems. And we're working with Eurostat, the European Office of Statistics, to help implement the UN guidelines on experimental ecosystem accounting. And I think I already mentioned the role of Horizon 2020, just to highlight that it's clear there are still major gaps to be filled. And I had mentioned forests. I should also mention marine, and in general, the links between ecosystem health and the provision of ecosystem services, and more generally, the provision of benefits. And this is one of the key areas that we're working on in MASS, is how to evaluate ecosystem condition and link that to the provision of ecosystem services. So to conclude, policy frameworks are largely in place. There has been quite a lot of progress in terms of actions under each of the targets. There's a wealth of positive experience to build on, but clearly these frameworks now need to be translated into action, and that needs to be taking place at all levels, not only EU level, but also national level, regional and local level. And so far, that has been done on an insufficient scale, and also given the timeline, there has been no measurable improvement in the state of biodiversity. So targets can only be reached if implementation and enforcement efforts become considerably bolder and more ambitious, and there's also a need for much stronger integration, and this will be a big focus in the next steps up to 2020. At the current rate of implementation, biodiversity loss will continue in the EU and globally, with significant implications for the capacity of ecosystems to meet human needs in the future, as I said at the beginning. And what we need is strong partnerships and full engagement of key actors, and again, to repeat, at all levels, with a focus on what we identified as 3 focus in the EU is to complete and manage effectively the Natura 2000 networks, so EU protected areas, promote green infrastructure and restoration, and implement the invasive alien species regulation. But very important as well is the effective integration in a wide range of policies, and that needs to be underpinned by coherent priorities and adequate funding. And this is the challenge, and at the moment we're assessing, we're doing the midterm review of the multi-annual financial framework. This is something that we will look at closely, as well as the next multi-annual financial framework. Agriculture and forestry, that's a key target in the strategy, and one of the key areas of action that we need to look at moving forward. Marine and fisheries as well. But beyond this, I mentioned regional development. That can be an important source of funding for biodiversity. And there's also a need for stronger integration in trade and development policies. Just to come back to the overall conclusion, we need to recognize natural capital throughout the EU. That means within protected areas, but outside protected areas as well. And it's important to recognize we're not talking about protecting species and habitats per se. That's important, of course, they have an intrinsic value, but beyond this, this is also contributing to wider objectives like food and water security, quality of life, growth and jobs, and more generally, the Sustainable Development Goals implementation. Since the Commission reports on the midterm review, there has been conclusion from the Council, so from all the EU member states, which I won't go into the details for the sake of time, but which largely recall the same areas for action. Just to mention a few, both the Council conclusion and the European Parliament reports call for initiatives like 10G, so European Network of Green Infrastructure, and No Net Loss Initiative beyond protected areas. And I won't mention all of them, but the European Parliament also calls for a specific initiative on pollinators. And within the Commission, we're looking at all these proposals for action for the next years and considering how to move forward. It's worth also highlighting that in these the Council conclusions recognize the role of local and regional authorities in implementing the strategic plan and the Aichi targets. And also to end on this conclusion, it's clear for the Commission and the EU institutions in general that the cities and local authorities have an important role to play as drivers of change. They can demonstrate new approaches, they can inspire new ideas. So we welcome very much this conference and also its inputs in COP13, and we are looking forward to further discussions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Moltes gràcies a tots per la vostra presència avui. Us recordem que demà la sessió que comença a partir de les 9 del matí serà... S'acoplen coses aquí. Serà aquesta taula rodona sota el nom de Preparant el camí cap al COP13, contribució de les regions amb una visió comuna. Thanks everyone. Tomorrow we're starting at 9 o'clock. There's this panel under the title Paving the Way Towards COP13, Regions Contributing with a Common View. See you tomorrow. Good evening. Molt bona tarda a tothom.